We are to apes what the Übermensch is to us.
I came to Nietzsche because lives were completely changed by reading Nietzsche. He'll say things like, I'm a disciple of Dionysius, or I am Dionysius, or I am the Christ, or I am the Buddha for Europe.
Every high culture needs slavery in some sense.
And I was like, who is this? Who is this writer? And so I read him, and I was like, oh my goodness.
Nietzsche is spiritual but not religious.
Yes, this is going to sound very Nietzschean. I so wish that you're not happy, that you're not normal. I want you to be totally messed up, and I want you to be really interesting. In other words, I want you not to fit in, not to be integrated into society,
Right.
because health and happiness are often...
Your true potential is higher than you can possibly imagine. It is literally superhuman. But modernity is suffocating that potential. Whether it's the materialists, the religious, or the technologists, they've trapped you squarely as a herd animal. This is why you need to learn to not fit in, to not be normal, to give up health and maybe even sanity if you want to realize this superhuman potential. This is the seductive invitation of my guest, Jeff Kripal, who's going to give us a mystical reading of Nietzsche's Übermensch. Now, Jeff himself is a scholar of mysticism who had a transformative mystical experience while researching Hinduism in Calcutta as a young man. As you're going to hear in this interview, Jeff came face to face with the erotic presence of a Hindu goddess as a grad student decades ago. He literally had an experience with divinity and has since been wrestling with his experience through his writing. Jeff's ambition is for his writing to engender similar mystical states in your life to realize your superhuman potential, and he sees the same mystical inspiration and impulse in Nietzsche. Jeff's claim is that Nietzsche must be read primarily not as a political, philosophical, or literary thinker, but as a mystical and religious one. And he thinks this is true for all the great thinkers. They are all mystics inspired by their own supernatural experiences. What you're going to hear in this interview then isn't just a new way to read Nietzsche, but a new way to read the entire canon as mystical. Jeff is mounting nothing less than a Copernican revolt against the materialist worldview. If you want to be invited to online and in-person lectures, seminars, and events that I host across the world, then please join my email list at jonathanb.com to be kept up to date. Without further ado, Jeff Kripal. Who is the Übermensch for Nietzsche?
The Übermensch is the future human. It's where humanity is evolving or transitioning toward. And we are a transitional species, not just a transitional person, but a transitional species.
We are to apes what the Übermensch is to us.
That's the image Nietzsche used, of course, and thus spoke Zarathustra, that we're on this tightrope, and when we look in one direction, we see the ape, and when we look at another, we see the Übermensch, and we're sort of in the middle of this. We're on our way, as it were. But Nietzsche was not a Darwinian in the sense that he didn't think that this was a random process, that there was some role here, some central role for the will, as he called it. And so it's unclear how we get to the Übermensch or to the superhumans, but again, it has something to do with culture, it has something to do with will, it has something to do with intending it, I suspect. There's certainly time travel that goes on in the Nietzschean text, so I think it's an occult or an esoteric practice that produces the Übermensch.
Your Nietzsche is more mystical than any Nietzsche I've ever encountered.
He's explicitly mystical.
Yeah, and so when I was taught who the Übermensch was, and I think this is the common kind of scholarly consensus, he's either a value creator, right, who is able to affirm a new set of values after the death of God. He's either a yes-sayer, or maybe he's an anti-egalitarian political leader, maybe like our friend Napoleon III here.
Yeah.
Yeah, are those missing something?
Yeah, I think it's missing a lot. There's like a niche of Nietzsche scholarship that definitely emphasizes this mystical or this Buddhist or this esoteric thinker. And I mean, I'll back up. I think what will help here is, so first of all, I came to Nietzsche because honestly, graduate students and colleagues, their lives were completely changed by reading Nietzsche. One of my graduate students, his life was literally saved by reading Nietzsche. I mean, he was going to commit suicide, and he entered a kind of trance state, and he Ouija drove to a major bookstore.
Ouija drove meaning unconsciously or
in a trance.
Right.
He wasn't supposed to go to this bookstore, by the way, because it was a pagan bookstore.
And he's a devout,
he was an evangelical
right,
Christian.
yeah.
He grew up in an evangelical household, and I think that's partly why he wanted to kill himself, by the way. And I think he was going to do this. He had the pistol, and it was, his parents were gone, and so he was going to die that night. And he trance drove to this bookstore, and he did a beehive to the philosophy section. He didn't even know what the word philosophy meant. And a book literally flew off the shelf and was "Thus spoke Zarathustra." Literally. And
which is one of Nietzsche's most mystical texts. Yeah.
It is his most mystical or poetic text. And this student took it home and literally read it in a thunderstorm, which is, if you've read the book, it's filled with thunder and lightning. And it's just a sign of the superhuman, by the way, of the Übermensch. And tears were streaming down this young man's face, and he put the gun away, and he didn't kill himself that night. So I heard those stories. I mean,
right.
There's stories like that. I mean, in the multiple. And I was like, who is this? Who is this writer? And so I read him, and I was like, oh my goodness. I immediately saw a mystical writer, an esoteric thinker. And then when I found out that he had essentially this altered state in front of this boulder in Sils Maria in August of 1881, I was like, okay, that's one of the moments. That's one of the moments right there. And then all these books that come after that in the 1880s, I personally think they're essentially channeled. I think he received them as a writer, and he just writes out all these books. It's crazy. It's like 8 or 9 books in the 1880s,
right,
within the span of 10 years, and we're still reading them.
You're giving him a run for his money, though, with your copious amount of production. And there's a serious point behind that joke, which is you talked about your own experience of a mystical experience you had in Calcutta, with this energy, sexual, erotic, and you describe your writing after that point as being channeled, and so you read that into Nietzsche. And my first foray into this whole realm was Girard. And Girard also described that he had a moment of insight, and he felt like the rest of his entire life was just unpacking whatever revelation that he received.
I think with a lot of writers and thinkers, that is how they receive ideas. I think it's utter nonsense that people think their thoughts.
Right.
You don't think your way to
Is there
thought.
any hope for someone like me, that is a second-rate thinker, clearly, who has not been granted the divine?
Well,
the divine.
There's hope. I think your desire. I think desire itself and your seeker status is itself evidence that there's something there, and I think something responds to that seeking. And when you then create works of culture, and that might be art, that might be literature, that might be philosophy, that might be film or a podcast, I think there's some kind of relationship going on,
right,
between that seeking and that inspiration.
So here's my first question for you personally. Before you were writing without being channeled, because you were a scholar before already, and after you're writing, describe to us the phenomenological difference, and this might help us understand Nietzsche as well. Yeah.
Well, the phenomenological difference is that after that event in Calcutta in '89, I felt that I had to write, and it wasn't that it stopped the scholarship or it stopped the historical analysis, but it added this other level to it. There was a kind of verticality. There was a kind of, like, to put it mildly, before the event in Calcutta, I would have psychoanalyzed saints and been happy with a kind of Freudian horizontal reading of it. Afterwards, I knew that was true, but I also knew there was this vertical dimension.
Wow. Well, this is so fascinating because the next obvious question I was going to ask is, well, can we see this difference between before and after this event that inspired Nietzsche of the rock in his writings? And so I just read Zarathustra because I have a terrible habit of going to the places where ideas were formed. And I was just in Eze, where Nietzsche wrote, I believe, book 3 of his Zarathustra. And he used to hike this mountain path that connects this extremely steep slope that comes from the ocean and then goes all the way to the highest peak. And he writes about that. He says the highest peaks comes from the lowest. Yeah. And what was striking reading book 3 while hiking that trail is how much he emphasizes verticality. And he mentions that he hates the plains, right? And what's really interesting is my muggle mind, clearly before I was inspired by you, I immediately went to a political reading.
Yeah.
Verticality is as anti-egalitarian as
yes, correct.
It's his infamous
transcendence
statement.
Equals authoritarianism.
It's his infamous statement that every high culture needs slavery in some sense. But you're hinting at something different, a real kind of ontological verticality, right? I wonder, is that available in his early works? I'm trying to think. Birth of Tragedy, Untimely Meditations. Yeah, maybe it is. Yeah.
I think Nietzsche. I don't put everything on the Sils Maria Boulder awakening,
revelation,
the 6,000 years above man and time, as he put it in his notebooks. I think he was inspired from the get-go to link altered states and creativity and art and thinking, but these things did develop, and they manifested in these moments of inspiration and mystical awakening. I mean, if you read a lot of Nietzsche, what you realize is that the ego is a function of language. It's not really real. You learn that there's these other ecstatic states of inspiration that are really key to his ideas. I mean, you read him as a religious thinker, and his rejection of God is very familiar. It's like, well, he's rejecting the images of God. He's rejecting theism. Good for him, but it's not a rejection of the religious or spiritual impulse.
Interesting.
And he'll even say, I'm the most spiritual person in the world. He says that.
In other words, Nietzsche is spiritual but not religious.
Yes.
Interesting.
I think so.
Yeah.
And I think the thing about Nietzsche is he's fierce. He's fierce in his writing, but he was not fierce in his personality and his life. He was a very gentle human being who got along even with religious people really well.
Right, sickly and he almost the reverse of what he advocates for. Yeah,
and I think his sickliness and his suffering is somehow tied into this as well. This is what I call the traumatic secret. That there's something about madness and illness and breakdown that's a part of these insights as well.
Before we go back to Nietzsche, I think you helped me interpret another common thing, which is, what begins all the great poems, sing to me, O Muse. This is not just some random invocation. This is a genuine inspiration in your mind, right?
I think it's very real. I think it really happens.
This is going to come off maybe as funny or overly modern, but how can I, again, a mere muggle, ever why bother at this point? The muse is singing through you. I'm using my own brain trying to figure. You see what I'm trying to say, right? Like, how can I ever compete with the divine revelation, folks? But are there great thinkers who have not been touched by the muse?
I don't think so.
Okay, so there's no hope for me whatsoever.
No. So there's good news and there's bad news.
Okay.
The bad news is I really do think it takes these extraordinary experiences to have these insights. And to write these books or to create these works. The great thinkers, Schopenhauer and Hegel and Marx, I think they're all right. They got something going. Okay. And
that's the bad news for me. What's the good news?
Here's the good news. This is really good news. They wrote books. And they wrote books so you could read them.
So it's the secondhand muse.
No.
I want what you had.
No, this is where the theory of writing comes in. They wrote books to encode and transmit their altered states. And then readers pick those books up decades, maybe centuries later, and sometimes they themselves have these altered states. So the books themselves
Are the transmitters.
are the transmitters of the altered states. That's what I'm trying to say.
Right.
And,
Okay.
and so that's the good news, because when you study the humanities, and I think we've messed that up, I think that's the wrong thing to call it, what we're really doing is transmitting altered states and being impacted by these states of inspiration.
Okay, fascinating. And we're going to fully unpack this if people are interested. Let's go back to Nietzsche. When you read Nietzsche, what did you find that was so valuable for you?
It had something to do with a writer who was acknowledging that the image of God that people assume is just wrong, and it creates tremendous human suffering, and that there's this deeper human spirituality that is beyond all that, and that will result in some superhuman evolution or some superhuman future that's actually wildly affirmative and like really, really amazing.
Interesting.
So the way Nietzsche was received in my education, the way he was communicated to me, he was just a naysayer. He was the source of...
It was the genealogy. It was the Nietzsche of the genealogy, right?
He was, and that's all true. That he is a naysayer. He is a master deconstructor. But he himself will say, these are all just warm-ups for the yay-saying. I'm really about yay-saying. I'm really about getting human beings out of their nihilism and out of their depression, and affirming the innate divinity of all things and all people. And so he'll say things like, I'm a disciple of Dionysius, or I am Dionysius, or I am the Christ, or I am the Buddha for Europe. Or, he was very aware of his superhuman status, as it were. And so I think he was very in touch with this, the humanist too, again, as I call it, the superhumanity. But that doesn't mean he himself was superhuman. This is what a lot of people miss. It wasn't about affirming that individual social...
He says this explicitly, that I am not who I write about in the genealogy, yeah.
Well, he's right. I mean, he knows that. And he says in his Nachlass too, he says, there are people on the first floor and they hear me rustling around on the second floor and they can't understand me. Nothing is heard. They have no idea what I'm saying. But I'm not talking about the first floor. I'm talking about the second floor. And there's a sky above the...
Right. This is the verticality again.
There's a verticality again. And so I think we just shuffle around on that first floor and we say, oh, Nietzsche is about self-glorification.
Anti-egalitarianism, yeah.
That's just it's all first floor stuff. And that is not what these books are about. What he says is books like A Genealogy of Morals and Beyond Good and Evil, these are what he calls fish hooks. They're ways to hook people in for books like Twilight of the Idols and Ecce Homo and Thus Spoke Zarathustra, which he thought was his most revelatory book that anybody had ever written in all of human history. It just wasn't his best book. It was the best book ever written. I'm like, whoa, of course, that's what every writer thinks. But we're still reading that.
Right. In fact, he said that there would be an entire department set up just to study Thus Spoke. He's not too far off. Yeah, he's not too far off. Let's go back to the Übermensch, because we sort of danced around what it might mean. Can we say, does Nietzsche say anything more determinate? So we can break this down, right? Like on the values layer, what are the values of the Übermensch? On the biological layer, is he like us? On the mental layer, you seem to imply a mysticism. Tell us a bit more about what Nietzsche says and what you might want to add on to that.
So first of all, I don't think Nietzsche knew exactly what the Übermensch is, because obviously the Übermensch doesn't exist yet. But I do think he had insights and he had ideas of what the Übermensch might be. Certainly, it's about creating new values. And essentially, I think what Nietzsche means by that is you see that the standard moral and religious values of the time are of the past. People have created them, but you have enough, the Übermensch has enough self-will or enough confidence to create new morals and to create a new worldview.
Right, but that kind of sounds like a first floor Nietzsche, or that can be a first floor Nietzsche because...
Well, you asked about values. I mean, I think that's what that is about.
Right, okay, so, but it's more than that, right? Because I can do that. I can create new values.
Maybe.
But
I mean, I maybe I can, maybe I can't. I mean, I'm not so sure.
I'm saying it's within the realm of metaphysical possibility for you to create new values.
Maybe, I don't know.
But is there anything more than a value creator? So, because that's the kind of standard reading of the
by
Ubermensch.
New values, though, he didn't mean what we mean. When we think about new morals, we're thinking in English. Mm-hmm. You know, we're locked in to a particular language game, and we're articulating values probably in a social sense. And I have a dear friend who is a Nietzsche scholar, Paul Loeb, who really thinks the Ubermensch is a new biological species, and that it will live and maybe is living among humans right now. And so there's another kind of human species that comes out of us that certainly we reproduce and we biologically create, but is fundamentally not like us. And so I think this is where I go to science fiction, where the Ubermensch is really received the most accurately is actually in comic books and science fiction. I mean, you literally get the Superman in 1938, and that's not necessarily completely faithful to Nietzsche, but it's clearly Nietzschean. And you get superhumans everywhere, everywhere. We call them superhero comics, but you also get this notion of linking evolution and spiritual insight in science fiction, and in film now, and in television. And I think that's where these ideas are debated and talked about in the most explicit way. And I'll give you an example, please, Jonathan, and we can come back to this. But I personally think Magneto of the X-Men is Nietzsche. I think it's just
there's many things you can mean by is. The writer intended it to be, or literally. I mean,
Nietzsche. He's voicing Nietzschean ideas in a very and he's saying, don't worry about the humans, but not just don't worry about them. I'm going to kill them. I mean, it's pretty violent.
Yeah.
And Xavier is always there. He's sort of the liberal professor saying, no, wait a minute. We have to get these two species to live together, the humans and the superhuman. And so you have this debate. And what's so interesting about that particular mythology is Xavier and Magneto are friends. They understand each other. And so it's not this violent debate. It's like they play chess together.
Wait, isn't Magneto a villain?
What do we mean by a villain? This is another thing. What do we mean by a villain? Well, we mean, is he a supervillain? Well, but he's also on the X-Men. He's been on the X-Men team as well. So he kind of goes back and forth between these different, and Nietzsche himself, he called himself the Antichrist, and he wrote a book called The Antichrist. But he doesn't mean the Antichrist is evil, in the negative or sinister sense. He means it stands against the social values of the place and time, and certainly the Christian values.
Okay, so much to unpack here. We're going to get to your full read on comic books later because it's fascinating.
Yeah, okay.
But I just want to poke one question here, because you describe yourself as Xavier, or you use Xavier to understand your own kind of.
I think I inhabit that.
And so therefore you're opposing yourself to Nietzsche.
I don't idolize Nietzsche. I don't think he was right about everything.
Right.
I don't think anybody's right. I don't think I'm right about everything, Jonathan. So I think that's why everything needs to be talked about. But I love Nietzsche. I think Xavier loves Magneto. I think they're very affectionate friends, mythologically now speaking. The reason that I think I inhabit the Xavier mythology a lot is because a lot of people come to me to tell me their mutant stories. I mean, a lot. I'm not saying a little, a lot. And I'm a professor, and
you're a liberal professor.
I'm a liberal professor, and I live in a. I think I wrote a book called The Superhumanities. I want to start the school of the Superhumanities. this is it. The mythology is true.
And knowing your backstory, this is actually so cool because you're a little kid inside geeking out because you always wanted to be a superhero. Anyways, so I just want to pin down your reading on Nietzsche as much as I can.
I think Nietzsche had a non-dual experience, but he didn't have that Asian language. And so he framed it in terms of German idealism and Schopenhauer and all the things, the great books. That's essentially my read of it.
Right. And of course, Schopenhauer does draw on heavily from this Eastern language.
He does.
But on the Übermensch, the claim is he's gesturing at a direction, right? He's looking back at the evolution from ape, and he's gesturing in a direction. It has something to do with the courage to create new values. There's probably a biological component to it, but it's amorphous.
I think it's more than that. I think it's much more than just creating new values. I think he's talking about divinity, some kind of ontological shift, some kind of epistemological shift in what human beings can become. And religion is the only language that our ancestors had to talk about that metamorphosis or that transformation. And Nietzsche will say, and I will say too, religion doesn't work for us anymore. If you want to kill a conversation on a plane, just tell them you're a professor of religion. Just go do that.
I'll have that in my pocket next time.
You can kill it instantly. So the words we use somehow kill the conversation and stop the transformation. And what Nietzsche was doing was like, we're not going to use those words. We're going to use a different language. And remember, he's thinking and writing after Darwin.
Right.
And we didn't have Darwin before 1859. We didn't have evolution. We didn't know that biological forms evolve and change, and that maybe everything changes, maybe everything evolves. But after Darwin, we began to suspect that. And Nietzsche's this amazing intellectual who in the 1880s takes that in and creates a whole philosophy or worldview around that basic idea. And that's the Übermensch.
I see. But he also has a very ambivalent relationship with Darwin. He's
not Darwinian.
Yeah, he thinks of Darwin as kind of petty and his insights are somewhat petty. So describe that relationship to us. What does he take? What does he reject?
So what he rejects in Darwin is randomness. That evolution isn't just about mutation, well, what later will be called mutation. It isn't just about randomness. There's something willed, to use the Nietzschean language, in this evolution. I think that's why he says, I'm not Darwin.
There's a teleology, in other words.
I think there is a teleology.
Yeah. Do you have a sense of by what mechanism evolution for Nietzsche happens and, importantly, is going to lead us to the Übermensch? Because, right, if you take the Darwinian view, the natural bedfellow is randomness, right? The natural bedfellow is these random mutations, survival of the fittest.
The will. The will. There's something about the will.
Right. This is the German idealism. This is
deep
Hegel.
Down now, not me willing breakfast or willing lunch or something, but this is what I meant by your seekership, this spiritual seekership. This is your will manifesting in all of these projects. So I think there's something deep down. This isn't very Nietzschean. There's something about the will that results in this future transformation.
Okay, well, that's a huge statement. Let's unpack that a bit.
I know it's huge.
So give an example. I'm a seeker, and that's going to change the genes of my children. I mean, I'm bastardizing it, right? But because there is a biological component to evolution. So how does the will connect?
Well, first of all, we know that genes are influenced by
epigenetics, right?
By will. And by how they're turned on and turned off. And we know that there's a...
Wait. Actually, this is the first time I'm hearing that. Genes are influenced by will. How?
Well, they're turned on and they're turned off. And the epigenetic thing. We can...
They're influenced by the circumstance how you live, or like the shape of your life, yeah.
Right, but the shape of your life is
the will,
by the will.
Right.
I mean, so it kind of goes back. So at the end of the day, I mean, scholars of Nietzsche will tell me things like, well, Nietzsche's not an idealist for obvious reasons, but he's also not an obvious materialist in the way we normally think of that either. And I think these are essentially idealist notions, that there's some kind of mental force that is determining or shaping material reality. And so I actually think we don't understand genetics.
Right.
I think there's something about genetics and mind or consciousness that we haven't even tapped into. And I suspect that's what the will is.
Right. You talk a lot about evolutionary esotericism,
Yeah,
right?
right.
That's
what we're talking about right now.
Yeah. So let me give you, again, I feel like I'm constantly trying to pull you down to the first floor, which is good, right? It's a tension, and I'm trying to ground you a bit, and you're trying to make me transcend a bit.
Yeah, because I'm really mucking around on the second floor.
Yeah. So it's a little tug of war we got here, which is great. Okay, here's my boring muggle secular interpretation of that, and I'm going to draw on a thinker who you mentioned in your books, Hegel, phenomenology of spirit. Right. There is an evolution of spirit throughout history. That's what the phenomenology is about.
But why? I mean, why? Why is there?
Okay, so the secular interpretation is that it's through the ideas level that how the will conceives of itself and the world becomes evolved.
Yeah.
But you want to say something stronger than that, right? It's not just, now we think of ourselves as free individuals, and before we were sort of. That's not what you're saying.
I'm saying something stronger.
Yeah, tell us about that.
Well, there's spirit. There's something behind the will. There's something behind the ego that is willing this and that is moving life forward.
Right.
And so I am saying something stronger than one of the things I quote a lot is it's anonymous. We don't even know who said it, but it's like a definition of hydrogen: a light, odorless gas that, given enough time, turns into people. Why? Why does it turn into people? Why evolution? Why the transformation? Why are the transitional species? Why? What is the deeper impulse or the deeper life force? And I think this is what Nietzsche was getting at. There is a deeper life force there. And I think this is what all the esoteric evolutionary systems are getting at, that there's a deeper life force that is not any of these specific moments.
Right. So,
but that's a faith statement, Jonathan.
Interesting. Yeah. Because of your experiences, and
do I know that? I mean, no, I don't know that. But gosh, so many people after Darwin say that because Darwin gives them a way of talking about their altered states.
You describe your ontology as a dual aspect monist, and for our audience, you affirm that there's material and consciousness in the kind of conventional realm, but you think they kind of all connect together. They're from one substance. Is that substance the spirit for you?
Yeah, that's that deeper.
That's the one. That's the one. So it's not just a spirit; it's the spirit of the world itself.
Yeah, I actually don't ultimately believe in spirits in the multiple. I of course they exist, for a time, but I don't think they're ultimate. I think that deeper unus mundus, or that deeper one, is where this is all coming from.
So the Übermensch is just the one, or he's still like us? He's still particulars. He's still particulars.
It's not even a he.
Right.
Übermensch is a human.
Okay.
I mean, and the Übermensch, if we take the biological perspective, which I like, has a material form just like you and I do, but there's also this mental world which is not ours, which is distinctly different. And again, I think that's the mistake we make, is we always reduce or explain things in terms of our own humanity or in terms of our own understanding or our own language. And I think what Nietzsche's saying, and certainly what I'm trying to say, is no, there is a future superhuman existence. It's literally super. It's literally not Englished. It's literally not cognition. It's literally something else. And I get so frustrated with people who just want to imagine the far future as just, I don't know. Again, it's English again, or it's material reality again in some biological sense that they like. It's always something they want. And I'm like, that's not it.
Can we say something more about where this direction of spirit's evolution is going, or where is this telos? You see clearly it's teleological.
It's going towards the Übermensch, and it's going, for Nietzsche now, it's going towards the Übermensch, and it's going towards a new understanding of temporality, and it's going through...
Okay, now we're getting somewhere. So it's something that is able to relate to time and substance radically differently.
Totally differently.
Than we do now.
Totally differently.
Right.
This is why, again, this will push us forward into the science fiction thing, but this is why I love the movie Arrival, because what it does is it shows that to understand the alien consciousness, you actually have to understand their language, and it completely changes how you think. And it involves temporality.
Right.
You understand on a direct level that temporality is not linear, that it's not just about causes in the past producing the present, that it's also about the future. It's also about causes from the future. So it totally changes things. And I think that's the kind of shift we need to make, is how we don't just understand temporality, but how we inhabit it.
Right.
Let me give you an example. So I personally think some of the strongest empirical evidence for paranormal phenomena is precognition. It's knowing what's going to happen before it happens.
Testimonial. Yeah.
It's wild, and it's banal, by the way. It's not what people, it's not everybody's Napoleon or Joan of Arc. It's not grand. Precognition is often banal. It's about details. And it has this reproductive or Darwinian function as well to it. And it's often about negative things, bad things that are about to happen. But it's obvious. It's obvious when you listen to these cases or these testimonials. Well, it's impossible. It's completely impossible if you only recognize causality as something that happens in the past and moves to the present. You can't. The future hasn't even happened yet.
Right.
Well, that's your worldview. That's your understanding of temporality. What if it's wrong? What if temporality is not like that at all? And so that's what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah.
That's the Übermensch. That's acknowledging superhuman experiences that have no explanation now, but they likely will have an explanation, or they'll have a worldview that makes them possible in the future.
Yeah. Before we unpack this with Nietzsche, and we're going to have to talk about eternal recurrence and will to power now, help the audience and me get to the kind of confidence you have in the real happening of precognition. What are the testimonies you're seeing? Give us an example. Give us an idea of the sheer quantity, the reliability. Just help us get to where you are.
All of that. Remember, I'm Professor Xavier. People tell me their experiences, and they're impressive. People are having experiences of the future 24 hours out, 3 years out, 10 years out. One of the most famous is a woman who woke up and told her husband, the chandelier's going to fall on our baby at 4:32 a.m., whatever the time was. I might have that off a few minutes. And the husband, of course, said, go back to sleep. It's just nothing, a bad dream. She says, no, I know. And so she goes and gets the baby, and the chandelier falls at 4:32 a.m., just exactly like she precognized.
Right. Well, there's another one with the child on the train track,
yeah.
right?
Yeah, so we have this too. We have this, again, it's a mother and a child, and we have this, the mother just knew that the child was in danger and was lying on the train track, and sure enough it was, but she had no way of knowing that.
Right.
So I think there's, one of the things people don't realize about telepathy, it means pathos at a distance. It means emotional entanglement at a distance. It doesn't mean you're playing the lottery or you're watching a football game or something. It's between
telepatho. Interesting.
Yeah,
it has to have
deep.
some stake. It has to have some.
It's this deep emotional bonding, and one of the other cases I tell a lot, I've written about, it began as a mother and a son. She sends her, this is a really interesting case. The mother sends her child with her nanny to the zoo, and at like, say 10, 11 a.m., I'll forget the time, she sees in perfect detail a white powder or a white cloud in her car, and she looks back and her son is screaming his head off, and they're in this big accident. And she thinks, oh my God, she mistakes it for clairvoyance. She says, oh my God, my nanny was just in a car accident, and I don't know what that white smoke is, but I know my child is screaming. And so she calls her nanny, and her nanny's fine. There was no car accident. And she says, I want you to drive on the side roads, and I want you to drive slowly and get back here. Because she took her vision seriously. I mean, it was like a vision. Just like she said, it's like a movie going off.
Right.
This isn't subtle. And the next day, the child, of course, wants to go back to the zoo because, of course, mom ruined the trip the first day. So the mom says, all right, I'm not taking any chances. I'm going to drive myself, this kid, to the zoo. And she's in a high-speed car accident, and the bags go off, and that's where the white smoke comes from. And she sees her child just exactly like in her dream before. And the guy who hits her, she can't move, and he calls the husband, and it comes in at like 10:14 a.m. So she had a precognitive vision at exactly the time that it happened, but she didn't know it was precognitive.
She thought it was
clairvoyant.
The same time, right?
Yeah. And so this is what you see in a lot of precognitive experiences. They mistake it for something else because they themselves can't deal with the circularity of time. And so
this is eternal recurrence.
Yeah, right. I think it's eternal recurrence. And so when Nietzsche talks about eternal recurrence, or when he talks about the Übermensch, I'm like, this is a real thing.
Yeah.
This isn't a metaphor. This is like, this is it.
So one thing, Nietzsche had a precognitive dream, right? As a kid.
Of course he did. His father died at 35, and he saw his father coming out of the graveyard and holding I think his son. And within 24 hours, the young boy develops a serious illness and dies.
Right.
And so Nietzsche says, my dream was fulfilled perfectly by the events of that. So he knew darn well that there was this circularity to temporality, and to how human beings tap into that through altered states, in this case, dreams, or in the case of the mother, this video going off in her head. So, I mean, those are just two experiences, Jonathan. There are thousands of these I've heard or read about. And after a while, you're just like, okay, that happens.
Yeah.
So what does the world look like? What does the world have to be?
What is the metaphysics to kind of make sense of this?
Yes, that's my question. What does the world have to be to make this possible?
Right. And again, we're going to go back, and I know I'm keep teasing the audience. We're going to go to eternal recurrence. We're going to go to willpower. But I just want to touch on something that clicked in my mind when you said that, which is, first of all, like, why are all the visions in the Bible like of disasters?
Okay, well, they're still bad. They're still negative.
Daniel, right? Revelation.
They're still all negative.
Here's my question for you, though. Have you yourself encountered anyone who told you a story that you decided to be fraudulent and that they were actively deceiving you?
I don't think intentionally, but
Wow, thousands of cases. You don't think there was one single?
There might have been. I mean, come on, it's the internet, it's email.
Oh, okay. They're emailing. Right.
People can bullshit. You know, they can just tell lies. But I'm very careful about what I write about. You know, I often know the person. And
so those stories, you talk to them, and
I wouldn't write about something. I wouldn't publish something if A, I didn't know the person, and B, I didn't ask for their permission, by the way, too. Right. I'm like really careful about, because there is a lot of, as you call it, fraud. There is a lot of lying in this zone. It's a fraught zone. But the question is always, Well, why?
Well, I have an explanation for you, because I get a lot of inspired, crazy, in-between people who comment on my things, especially after I've had interviews like this. And some of these, I can just tell they are not well. They are not.
I get a lot of that too, by the way.
They're just not well.
I get a lot of that.
They're not cogent. And we should talk about Nietzsche and his madness when there's something productive there. But I mean, is there just crazy? There is just crazy, yeah?
So sometimes,
Right.
I mean, this is the problem, is sometimes being crazy is being really insightful. And maybe what they're saying is true, you know? I mean, but there also is mental pathology, and there's a lot of projection, and there's a lot. So I don't actually believe everything, regardless
Right.
of what people think. And I'm very careful about, but I know that these experiences happen to people.
You know there are legitimate ones, for sure.
But
right.
I also know that they happen to people who are quote unquote crazy. I know that.
Right.
You know, and so I don't draw lines that are so simple, but I don't write about the people who are crazy. I don't. I really don't.
So you get a lot of people who you read this, you're like.
I also don't respond to those people, by the way.
Right. Because it encourages.
Yes. Yeah. And it's I feel great compassion, but I understand that I'm an authority figure. I think that's an illusion, by the way, but I understand that, and I use it in a particular way.
Right. Well, let's use this as a segue to talk about Nietzsche's madness.
Okay.
And let me give you a quote from one of your books. There's a legend that Nietzsche finally collapsed into madness while embracing the neck of a horse in a desperate attempt to keep it from being beaten by its owner. The superhuman is the man, both men actually, though the cruel man, the one beating the horse, does not know it yet. But it is also the horse. It is cross-species compassion. It is life itself. It is the only God, the spirit that you're gesturing at. And so am I, and so are you. Is there something philosophically profound in his madness? Most scholars don't think there is,
I think
right?
there is.
Okay. This is interesting, yeah.
You know, I've been deeply informed here by a philosopher named Walter Koesters, who wrote a book called The Philosophy of Madness. It's huge. I don't know if you've read it or looked at it. MIT translated it and published it. And basically what Koesters argues is that if you look at the history of philosophy, and particularly the history of mystical experience, it's a history of madness too. It's filled
there
with,
are non-man people, right?
Yeah, well, of course there are, but there are also states that are psychotic, and so he talks about the vita mystica psychotiva, you know, the psychotic mystical way. And I'm totally persuaded by Walter's argument and by other people's argument that there's this link between philosophical insight into the way things actually are and what we call mental illness. And again, you know, one of the things I tell my graduate students, and I realize this is going to sound very Nietzschean. I'm like, I so wish that you're not happy and that you're not normal. I want you to be totally messed up, and I want you to be really interesting. In other words, I want you not to fit in, not to be integrated into society,
Right.
because health and happiness are often codes for being integrated into the social system.
Right.
I don't want that, because that's actually not the case.
Yeah. This is the Matrix. You're living in the
This
Matrix.
is the Matrix,
Right.
or this is Plato's cave. I don't want you to be enchained in the cave. I want you to get out and see the light. But here's the thing: you need to return to the cave. You know, you need to come back in
To help others, or
yes,
to survive?
to help others. And you know what? The others will probably kill you, or they'll be really mean, or they won't give you a job, or whatever. They'll ignore you today. It's less violent today, but it's also probably very effective still.
Yeah, I see.
So
where does the direction of causality go between madness and philosophical profundity? Here's one direction. Madness causes philosophical genius in the following sense. You had this traumatic hypothesis, right? That the breaking down, the disorder. You had your mystical experience. While you told me you were sick, you were completely messed up, you were in a foreign land, you were out of your element. That's one direction. The other direction is that profound philosophical insight causes madness. Because you see all of this and you're like, well, I can't stay in the cave anymore.
That's the Muggle argument, by the way. So I work with a filter thesis. The filter thesis basically says that the brain in particular, but also the body, it doesn't produce consciousness. It filters it, it mediates it, it languages it, it enculturates it, it embodies it, but it actually doesn't produce it. That consciousness exists cosmically. It's like gravity. It's everywhere.
So we are a radio. The signal is not produced by the radio. The radio receives the signal.
So if that's your model, that is my model, by the way. If that's your model, how do you get that cosmic signal? You fuck with the radio. You break it down. And so you do things like meditate for hours on end, or lock yourself in a cave.
Aesthetic practice.
Yeah, you do aesthetic practice. Or you take a psychoactive chemical. And so this is where madness or psychosis, or a car wreck, a car accident will do that. There are ways to break open the ego, and that cosmic mind will rush in. But it doesn't mean that it's good for the person. This is what I'm trying to say. So the person, the psychotic individual...
Plato's divine madness.
Yeah, it might be completely true, and it might be really bad for the person. And the same is true of religious practice. The same is true of near-death experiences, by the way, often lead to divorces.
Interesting. Why? Because they just can't handle it.
The person's totally changed. It's not the same person.
Right. So okay, privately, actually, I was telling you how my secret path is preventing me from having a stable relationship. And this is what I mean. It's not very fun to be around, or it's not very stable, certainly, to be around someone like me. Yeah.
So again, this is the source of my humanist too. It's like we have to be in society, and we are egos and we are bodies, and that's all okay and good. But there's this other superhuman consciousness that surrounds us that is the source of insight in philosophy and religion. And there are individuals who can tap into that and who have tapped into that, but that does not mean that those individuals are good social egos or good people.
So if you think that tapping into this cosmic signal better is in some sense the telos, as the mystics do, of a life, right?
Yeah, I do.
And you do. And there is I won't say dependable way to get access to the signal, but there are things you can do, which is to damage yourself, to aesthetic practice, to really mess up with the radio, as you described. Does it follow that you would advocate for aesthetic practice or?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of religious people do advocate.
They do.
That's exactly where they go.
Right.
They advocate for those extreme aesthetic practices, and again, I don't question that, but this goes back to the good news, bad news. I get that through reading people who have been in these altered states.
Okay, so you had your you had your mystical experience quite young. You told me privately that you have been trying to recreate that experience.
I once tried. I don't anymore.
You once tried, and you were doing this kind of stuff. You were trying to mess with the radio.
Yeah, I was.
But it just didn't work for you.
It didn't work.
And so you were like, I just need to find a different way, right?
I think I gave up trying.
But why would you give up trying if it's the telos of man?
Because, I think we really get out of the cave and we really enter the telos when we die. And we all die.
Oh, so you're like, what's another 20, 50, 30 years?
It's like, I'm more like Agahananda Bharati now. It's like, I'm just going to be a professor and I'm going to do this thing, until I can't do it anymore. And then I'm an organic being. I'm going to die, but then I'm going to see the light, or I'm going to be the light. And I'm going to...
And this is what the near-death experiences, a lot of them show.
That's what they say. That's exactly what they say. And I'm like, yep, that's right.
Interesting. Nietzsche wrote, these are some of the quotes from Nietzsche, I'm all names in history. Among the Indians, I was Buddha, and in Greece, I was Dionysus. Alexander and Caesar are my incarnations. And he says, I have the most extensive soul of all Europeans now living, or who ever lived. Plato, Voltaire, I could become the European Buddha, which admittedly would be a counterpart of the Indian one. Most scholars interpret this, of course, as his madness,
This is madness.
as early madness.
I think he's right.
Right. And here's your defense of that. This is you. This is not Nietzsche anymore. The Muslim mystic al-Bistami famously proclaimed, "Glory be to me. How great is my glory." Bistami's successor in ecstatic speech, al-Hallaj, is said to have uttered phrases such as, "I am the truth," read, "I am God," and was crucified upside down for such outrageous offenses to Islamic orthodoxy. Consider the Christian mystic Catherine of Genoa, who once described her own most profound realization this way: the proper center of everyone is God himself. My me is God, nor do I recognize any other me except my God himself. This seems very radically different from the mystics I know, maybe mostly because they are Christian, I guess the last one was Christian, or Buddhist holy men, and they seem to have a radical selflessness to them.
A radical what?
Selflessness, egolessness. It's not, whereas Nietzsche was writing, and the chapter titles are hilarious. They're like, why I'm such a good writer, right? Why I'm so awesome. Right?
I love that stuff, by the way.
How makes sense? Egomania, egolessness.
But he also said that the ego is a function of language. It doesn't exist.
Right, okay. Help me make sense of all these statements. Are these, is this exact same as the holy men I've met, or is this the radical opposite?
I think so. I think they're saying the same thing.
Right.
You are not Jonathan B. You are God. I am not Jeff Kripal. My me is God. I think that's absolutely
because this
true.
is the one. It's the
this
signal.
is the one.
This is the signal.
This is the signal. I think that's absolutely spot on. Now, so Catherine and Halaj and certainly a lot of the other figures, they're using their religious categories because that's what they experience. That's what they know. They're using their filters as well. They're encultured. They're embodied. They're languaged. So they're going to speak in terms of whatever their culture is. And so is Nietzsche, by the way. So are we. So none of that bothers me. It's just like, of course it's filtered. Of course it's language. Of course it's always different. That's the nature of embodiment or language. But that doesn't mean the cosmic consciousness that's coming through is different.
Right. In other words, saying I'm all names, I'm God, is the exact same as saying I have no ego in your mind.
I think
right?
so. I read Nietzsche through this other mystical literature. I just think it's obvious. If you know this other literature and then you read Nietzsche, you're like, whoa, this is familiar. And yes, that exists on the margins of Nietzsche's scholarship, but screw them, Jonathan. They're talking about the first floor. And Nietzsche was very clear, I'm on the second floor. And you know what? You're not going to understand me. You're going to hear nothing. But what I'm telling you is this. And what he's telling us is what has been said in other mystical traditions.
Okay, so
I can hear him.
Yeah,
I can hear him just fine.
So I agree that metaphysically, I am God can mean I'm egoless because of the filter.
Yeah.
However, how do you make sense of Nietzsche's, I think, positive outlook to people who are egotistical, not in the merely the mystical sense, but in just the great thinkers and great writers who don't believe they're God? You see what I'm trying to say, right? I'm saying, okay, maybe these two extremes kind of horseshoe back together, but Nietzsche does kind of elevate, he doesn't affirm totally the master, but he does elevate the master as positive, certainly over the slave, as the very this worldly, prideful.
There's some very troubling things in Nietzsche. And again, I don't want to affirm everything Nietzsche thought or wrote. That's not the point. The point is to isolate these altered states, these ecstatic states, and to say these are extremely similar to X, Y, and Z.
Right. Let me try to push you maybe in another way, which is, how does one, as a mystical scholar or as a mystic, I think arrogance is a very easy thing to develop. In fact, I believe the Catholic tradition has the pride of humility or something like that.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm so holy. And
Yeah.
the reason I say it's easy to develop is because, I mean, you have this thing, Jeff, if you're right. I mean, you have the thing that everyone else is missing. You're up there on the second floor with Nietzsche. We're all here groveling with our muggle, I don't know what we're doing in this first floor. How do you, or maybe you don't need to defend arrogance. But
So first of all, the charge of arrogance and humility, those are social charges. That's the first floor making fun of the second floor again.
But you said you still need to operate in the cave. You still need to exist.
Of course you do. You still need to live on that first floor.
But you care about being a good person, a good social person, right?
Do,
and a good social person is not extremely prideful and arrogant and egomaniac, right?
Not generally. I mean, I get called arrogant. I've been described as arrogant a lot, but I'm just like, but it's not arrogance if it's true. It's like, look, you are God. If that sounds arrogant, then okay, then
I'm not saying those statements are arrogant. I think what I'm getting at is a bit more subtle, which is to say, okay, let me put it this way. I think part of the reason a lot of French and continental philosophy of the 20th century attracts young men especially is because it's all I got the key to unlock everything.
You got what?
I got the key to unlock everything. This is the hermeneutics of suspicion, whether it's Foucault or whether it's Nietzsche. And how mysticism, in my mind, can be the ultimate form of that. Okay, this is not a charge. Really, this is a confession. Which is when I think about these states, when I think about my own experience here, maybe I tend to develop ideas of pride that I do not fully endorse in the first floor. And my question for you is, how does a mystical scholar guard against that, if at all?
Okay, so the way at least I avoid that is through humor. Again, I say things like, I don't believe in myself. I love comedians, and I think when you laugh at something, you're standing outside it. You're not it, because you can't laugh at something you are. And so I think mystical states lead to profound states of reflexivity and not knowing. And by not knowing, I don't mean, I don't know A plus B equals C. I mean, you really don't know. There's the whole point of knowledge is this subject knowing something about an object, and there's that's not non-duality.
Right.
So arrogance, what are you talking about? That's the state of an ego in relationship to a society. It's like you're in the realm of difference and division there. It just doesn't even make any sense.
Okay, so here's the two-pronged response I'm hearing. Number one, there is no self to be arrogant, but there's also on the conventional layer, you're saying, yes, as a mystic, a scholar of mysticism, I know a lot, but it's also shown me so like how deeply unknowing I am, right? So I promised the audience we'd go back to eternal recurrence.
Okay.
When I learned of eternal recurrence from the Muggles on the first floor, this was what they told me. Eternal recurrence is a thought experiment. Yeah. It's a way you use to evaluate your own life.
That's how you get around the reality.
Yeah, but I do think it's an interesting thought experiment in the following sense. Can you affirm your life even if it doesn't lead anywhere?
Yeah.
So it's an anti-teleological, can you just say, no afterlife, no eschatology, no divine retribution, no karma. Would you will your life again? I think that's a quite helpful thought experiment. So I was happy to stay on the first floor to tell me the real reading.
I think he really experienced eternal recurrence. This is where, again, I differ with the Nietzsche scholars. Like, take déjà vu. When you experience something in the moment that you just had an experience of. You're in a eternal recurrence, as it were. So I think time itself is recurring, is a temporal loop. But I don't necessarily think that we're going to experience everything again, But I think the fact that everything has already happened is itself eternal recurrence. So I live in what's called a block cosmology. So the past and the present and the future have already happened.
Right. Time is the fourth dimension that exists, that only appears as if it's time to us, limited beings.
Yeah, I mean, this is relativity theory. This is modern physics too. This isn't an unreasonable claim, but it helps me to understand things like precognition, and it also helps me to understand things like eternal recurrence, which is what Nietzsche said.
Okay, again, this is my analytical philosopher hat here. There can be a block universe where time is linear. Everything has already happened, right? So think about this as a movie cassette tape, right? The movie is linear. Everything's happened. In that world, you can totally have precognition because the thing already happened already. So my question for you is, where do you get the coming back from? Where do you get the circularity? Yeah.
I personally get it back from having a precognitive experience of something that's going to happen and then experiencing that. So there's a kind of loop there, So
okay,
again, this isn't faithful to, I think, how Nietzsche understood eternal recurrence. I'm not suggesting that.
You're developing this.
I'm just developing this in my own way, and I'm saying, well, that is a kind of eternal recurrence and the reason it's eternal is because the past, present, and the future already exists and always have and always will. It's literally eternal. And because we can experience the future, there's a circle there, there's a loop. And so like take Amor Fati or the love of fate. Well, okay, take this carpet. Here, let's think about this carpet. If we're in the present and the present is here and the past is here, nobody has any problem with all of these past causes being completely determined. But for some reason, when they turn around on the carpet and they look to the future, they have big problems with all of those events being determined.
Right.
Why? Why do we do that? Well, it's because our experience of time is right. Informing us. But I just think, again, we're biological creatures, we're neurological creatures, we experience temporality because of our biology, our neurology, not because that's how it is.
Does that lock you into determinism of sorts?
Okay, so that's a good question. So I think determinism and free will, I think those are first floor
concepts. These are
They make no sense in a non-dual world.
Right.
None. And so Beyond Good and Evil, which is another text he wrote, they make no sense. Those good and evil, that moralization makes no sense on the second floor. But it's really important on the first floor.
Right.
And I'm living on the first floor with you.
Yeah.
But I'm also reading people who are on the second floor. I'm like, yeah, that's the way.
Yeah, and unlike me, you actually went to the second floor once. And
just once.
Yeah, that's one more than me. Okay, so let me ask you this. Is there a worry that the existence of the second floor makes the first floor seems less worthy of engagement?
Yes, of course.
Right.
I have that worry.
How does one address that?
You talk about it like this. You say, I'm worried of that. That's the case. If you're really living in a non-dual world, though, that's not true. Because the first world exists.
First is the second floor, right?
Of course it exists.
Right, I see. Right, like this moment in the block universe, the block is the second floor, presumably. But this is part of the block, and it's a deep affirmation of the first floor again.
It's a super affirmation.
Right.
Yeah, it's
interesting. You almost have more reason to engage because this is going to be eternal. Right?
Yeah, this is the way things are.
Right.
And Amor Fati, you love fate because it's all strung out. Everything has already happened, and so you embrace it all. You affirm it all.
What do you mean by willing backwards?
Well, that's Paul Loeb. If you live in a block universe, there's nothing really. There's no real reason that you can't access the past just like you can access the future. You can't change the events because that would change you, right? I mean, there is that, but you can change what those past events meant and how they are perceived. So, for example, a lot of hermeneutics, a lot of interpretation of religion completely changes what we think of the past.
Oh, interesting.
The meaning of the past totally changes, but willing backwards gives a kind of realism to that act. It's not just a cognitive game that somebody's playing in the present about some past text.
I'm somewhat disappointed because you gave the Muggle interpretation of the hermeneutics. By reinterpreting our conversations yesterday, I change the past by changing how it influences me now and in the future, okay?
Yeah.
I don't actually change the events.
Yeah.
Can you tell the story of John that you wrote about, where he actually goes and changes the past?
Yeah. I think people do that too, by the way. It's not the only story that I've heard. John is a PhD student, and basically the story involves him being in the basement in New Jersey, and he's about to enter many, many years of intense suffering. And he sees this person in khaki pants and shoes and thongs at the window. He lives in one of these apartments. It's in a basement, so you can only see the legs of whoever is out there. And so he definitely sees, and he knows that there's somebody out there, and he feels this really strong communication. It basically says, things will be okay. It'll be okay. And years later, he finds himself going to the same window in khaki pants. And
importantly, the light, which he turned off, was on when he went back. And he sees his younger self.
Yeah.
He literally sees his younger self.
Yeah.
And he is the one who wills that.
Yeah. And he helps himself get through this very difficult part of his life by communicating that it's going to be okay. And he realizes it's him doing that.
Yeah, because he sees his younger self. This is like the interstellar kind of communication. And again, this is the kind of stuff that if you weren't the one who's writing it, and frankly, even when you were the one who's writing it, I was like, come on.
I know.
And
this is what people have.
And then I chased John down. I talked with him before this interview because I interviewed his dad, and he's a grad student of yours. He's a totally sober person. I mean, totally lucid, totally like he's not a crank. He's not trying to.
This is my position, Jonathan. John's like one of 1,000 people who come to me and tell me these stories, and I'm like, these person's clearly not just making this up.
And importantly, I've seen crazy, and I know what crazy is, and he's more lucid than me, right?
He's super smart.
Yeah.
I mean,
skeptical.
And read Hegel and quotes Martin Heidegger and the whole, I mean, he knows the literature inside and out. But that's a really good example of a time travel, visiting yourself from the future, that I hear all the time. You know, and again, this is why I think eternal recurrence, it's not a thought experiment. It's real. It really, and what I say is it happens. And that kind of leaves open the door of what we mean by reality, but this is clearly in the zone of human experience.
Okay, here's a question for you. In the credible cases of this kind of backwards willing time travel that you've heard, do they ever actually change the past in the following sense? That their prior event is different from, they try to change the prior event, right? Because John does faithfully what his younger self sees. Do people ever try to change things?
Well, they claim that. The stories sometimes claim that they
did change it.
I don't think there is.
Because it's a block.
Yeah, it's a block. For me, it's a block. And I understand that will to change the past, but I don't think it happens. And I don't, it's not that I trust, it's not that the experiencer is authority of his or her own or their own experience. If that makes sense.
Yeah, so you trust the fact that something happened, you don't necessarily trust the interpretation.
Or the experience. The interpretation might be woven right into the experience. The experience.
Right.
So, you know, someone experiences God or experiences an angel or something or a demon. I'm extremely suspicious that there's an angel in the room or there's a demon in the room. But I know darn well that person had that experience.
Right.
So that's more what I mean.
I was also taught back in Muggle Land that Nietzsche's a perspectivist.
Yeah.
Okay, and what this means is, for our audience...
I was taught in Muggle Land too, by the way.
Yeah, and what this... by the way, on that point, I just realized that the purpose of a philosopher is to become a wizard. Because a philosopher is a lover of wisdom. And a wizard, you just meant, is a wise man. That's what whiz comes from, right? Yeah. And I guess I'm it's literally escaping Muggle Land. That's my raison d'etre. Okay, Perspectivism for our audience is this idea that you can't access capital T truth. There is no objective perspective. Everything is merely perspective. The best thing you can do, get different angles of the chair and at it. You insist that Nietzsche experienced the capital T truth.
Yeah, I do. And I think the idea that perspectivalism is generally true is itself a normative statement, by the way. It is a truth with a capital T, and
Right.
they don't generally recognize that, but it's clearly true. The idea that everything's a perspective is itself a norm.
And it's a true truth.
Yeah.
It's a true claim.
Yeah.
But that's on the first floor. Is that where you're going to go?
No, I don't think that's where Nietzsche was. I think he felt that certainly worldviews and certainly religious worldviews were perspectives in this relative sense, but that there was a truth with a capital T. He wouldn't speak like that because he didn't want to draw this distinction between the other world and this world, right? He's a non-dualist again. This is my point. And because we don't have that language in the West, we read it in these boring secular ways. He's a perspectivalist, or he's a naysayer, or he's a deconstructionist, or he's an early postmodern, or whatever. But I just don't think we have the imagination, and we don't have the language and the experience to really listen.
Right. I think one challenge about your mystical reading of Nietzsche is the dominant Muggle reading that he is what is called a naturalist, I believe.
Yeah.
Right. And so he's a big fan of modern science. And I know your response, which is to say you love science as well. There's nothing wrong with affirming the study of material because it's one part of the dual. The issue, however, is Nietzsche has these kinds of statements in Ecce Homo. Okay, so he says that starting in the late 1870s, a truly burning thirst took hold of me. Henceforth, I really pursued nothing more than physiology, medicine, and natural sciences. And he laments earlier in the book, I believe, his words, blunder that he became a philologist. Why not at least a physician or something else that opens one's eyes? So he's not just saying, I affirm naturalism, I affirm natural sciences. It seems like he's saying these are the only things that are valuable. How do you reconcile that?
I don't. So what?
I mean, it's contrary to your reading, right? Well,
no, it's not. These were first floor statements. It's like he's living in the 1870s and 1880s. So what? I mean, he's limited by his culture and his politics and his ethics and everything else.
But this directly goes against your emphasis of how important those mystical events were for Nietzsche. No?
Not as a writer. I mean, I think you can write stuff you can write all kinds of stuff. You write all kinds of contradictory stuff too, and it's all true. It's just on what level is it true? Is it true on this first floor, or is it true on the second floor? I don't think it's true at all on the second floor.
Right.
However, now having said that, the Übermensch and the eternal recurrence of time are not scientific claims. Those are claims way beyond medicine and neurology and physics. Now, he had mathematical or physical dreams of proving eternal recurrence, but it never happened.
Right.
So I think his last two teachings, which in many ways are the most important of his whole career, are not scientifically established at all in the 1880s.
Right.
They're still not established. We're still sitting here, treating these as Muggle ideas when I think they're clear human truths.
Yeah. I think it's interesting that for how much he hated Christians, Nietzsche actually was a more big fan of Christ than you would think.
Oh, he loved Jesus.
Yeah.
But he just didn't. Yeah.
The real enemy is Paul.
Yeah.
Right? And so tell us about that divide and why you describe him as spiritual but not religious.
Well, Nietzsche was also really friendly to Christians, to human beings. I mean, he was a very gentle, good person. He was fierce when he wrote about the reason I think he rejected Christianity was because of this division between this absolute truth and this lesser truth, this division between the transcendent and the immanent, or between theism and naturalism, and so he calls this resentiment. The people who are not privileged by the social system resent the people who are privileged by the social system, and you get this idealism or this transcendent kind of notion of truth that comes through Christianity, and that's why I think that's basically why he rejects Christianity. But he doesn't reject Jesus because he doesn't identify Jesus with Christianity.
Right. Neither do you.
Nor do I. Of course he did. Of course he wasn't. He wasn't even Christian.
Right. So people have read the God is dead, we have killed him as both some kind of victory for the reasons you mentioned, but also as a lament that now we are in this new land.
I just think it's non-dualism. Of course there's no God. Everything
because you and I are.
Yeah.
Right.
It's all one. It's not two. The theism is practically true, and people believe it, and okay, but it's not really true.
Yeah. Let me read to you another quote you wrote about Nietzsche. Nietzsche also famously equated great spirits with skeptics, since they, very much unlike the believer, do not land and are not convinced by this or that belief statement.
Yeah.
The skeptic is in fact strong, the believer weak. The skeptic overcomes, to use a Nietzschean word, whereas the believer does not. Religious convictions are finally lies. There's definitely part of that reading of Nietzsche I agree with, namely the religious conviction. But does he really think the skeptic is strong? I mean, think about the Untimely Meditations, his second book, and he talks about how truth must be in service of life, how forgetting, not remembering, not knowledge, is a key to world historic action. And his active spirit, the master is kind of an idiot, right? The master is like a high school jock who because of his ignorance, he's not a skeptic like you and I.
Yeah, I mean, when we talk about skeptics, we're really talking about a materialist ideology. I mean, in the modern world, skeptic means you're affirming some kind of materialist model and you're rejecting everything that disagrees with that. I mean, maybe I should have wrote free thinker there.
Right, free spirit.
Yeah, free spirit. Free spirit.
Yes.
And Nietzsche, like Einstein, by the way, he rejected the free thinking movement for its horizontality, for its refusal to affirm vertical experiences. And Einstein, in particular, he didn't believe in a personal God either, by the way, and completely rejected it. But was insistent that there was this verticality, that there was this cosmic nature to the human being. And I think that's much closer. I know that's not Nietzsche, but I think that's closer to where Nietzsche's going. So the free spirit, certainly is closer to maybe a better expression than skeptic here.
I see. Let me give you another quote about your writing on Nietzsche. Studying every detail of Nietzsche's life and writing, from his obvious indebtedness to Greek mythology to his repressed, tortured, and philosophically fecund homosexuality. So tell me about Nietzsche's homosexuality, and what part of his philosophy do you attribute to that homosexuality?
There's a kind of, I think it's largely sublimated. I think this emphasis on transgression and thinking beyond the social categories is rooted deeply in one's sexual orientation and one's spiritual orientation, which doesn't fit in either at all.
Interesting.
And so you, as a man who loves other men, you are condemned and you're pathologized and you're demonized in the cultural surround. So you're very suspicious of the cultural surround. And Nietzsche was like really suspicious of the cultural surround in like a Nietzschean way. This argument that Nietzsche was homoerotic is controversial, but it's also in the literature. And he was never married. I don't think. I know he
had this thing with Lou, right?
He loved Lou Salome, but never married her.
Well, he tried, not for lack of trying. And he had the prostitute, the syphilis. Maybe that's apocryphal.
Again, that's a story.
That's apocryphal. Yeah.
Again, I think that's a way that the society takes him down.
Right. Okay, but give me the evidence on the side of his homo. Because surely you don't want to say anyone who's a master of suspicion is a homosexual. No. Freud's not a homosexual.
No.
Foucault is, right?
But there's a kind of radical suspicion or transgression of society that rings true to me. And also, there are also biographical links here, I'll just give you one. Sue Prideaux wrote a beautiful book called I Am Dynamite, which is a biography of Nietzsche. And she goes into great length about his split with Richard Wagner. And Wagner was essentially the superstar of Europe of the time and wrote operas, and Nietzsche was sort of his chosen prodigy, really, from the 20s on. And Nietzsche breaks with him. And the story, the Muggle story, which we get from Elizabeth, his sister, who also basically sold him to the Nazis, by the way, that's why the Nazis picked up on him, is that Nietzsche broke with Wagner because Wagner was too Christian. That actually isn't what happened. What actually happened was Wagner was very concerned about Nietzsche going blind. He was literally going blind because of his masturbation. That was the medical link of the time, that masturbating made you blind. And so Wagner was writing his doctor friends about Nietzsche's masturbation. And so there's this same, what I'm trying to get at is that he has his sexuality, but it's a medicalized one, and he breaks with probably the most famous figure of the time in Europe over this very issue, really. Has nothing to do with Wagner's Christianity. Right. It has to do with this linking of blindness and masturbation that Wagner was pushing with his...
And sorry, the readings here that Nietzsche got offended that Wagner shared this detail with others?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I see. But how is that a
So how does that fit into... It doesn't fit directly into the homosexual thesis, but it's just, again, it's just more...
It's the vibe you got from reading him. Yeah, you have a very developed radar for this after...
I do. There is a kind of radar here. There's also a book called Zarathustra's Secret that develops this at great length from Nietzsche's scholarship. So it's not just Jeff saying this.
Right, I see. The one thing this actually, and I'm so glad you got into this thesis, and maybe this ties into, yesterday we talked about
By the way, I don't think masturbating makes you blind.
Thank God.
But Nietzsche was really going blind. I mean, the blindness was a real thing.
And he was really masturbating.
That's a real thing too.
Okay, so I'm glad we clarified that. I'm sure our audience, many audience members were very worried before you said that. Okay, so what I did take, and you're the only other person I've met who's talked to me about this, is I've often wondered why homosexuals are so overrepresented in creative fields, right?
Tons.
Right.
Way overrepresented.
Ridiculously, ridiculously. And what I find crazy is if you look at the respective technological capitals of Europe and America, they're also the homosexual capitals, Silicon Valley and Berlin. Why is that? Because usually the tech guys are kind of more right-wing, right? And so there's no clear political divide. And here's my resolution. It's a Muggle resolution, but here it goes.
I think like a Muggle too.
Which is the homosexual, like you said, delights in transgression, or not delights. They must live in transgression. And that's what technology is about.
Yeah.
And that's what innovation is about.
Yeah.
It's the encouragement of you can be different. You must be different. You must transgress. You must break the boundaries. It is tantra, right? That's my grand theory.
Yeah, that's not a Muggle thought. That's kind of pushing beyond Mugglehood. But also, just to go back to the Muggle thing, men who love men generally don't have children. They're freer. They're freer economically and they're freer culturally, and there's a space here for creativity and art and religion and philosophy that I think is really remarkable. So I think there are practical reasons for it, but there are also deeper spiritual or psychosexual social reasons for it that I think are are really significant because it's
ridiculous.
It's
the
it's
overrepresentation.
ridiculous.
Yeah, in science and
Yeah. I mean, Freud even talked about this.
Yeah.
He saw it too. And but I think the same is true in religion, by the way. I think a lot of religious prodigies love people of the same sex, and I think that's why you get religious creativity and you get a lot of religion the way it is.
That's two knocks against me ever becoming a great writer. Not a homosexual.
But I'm a boring Muggle straight guy too. So there's hope. There's hope, Jonathan.
All right.
Maybe not much. Maybe I'm not a good model. But.
Yeah. So let's leave Nietzsche, although one never really leaves Nietzsche.
Yeah.
Because I want to investigate through the rest of our interview about this idea of writing and mysticism as deeply intertwined. That, I think, is one of your most exciting ideas.
Yeah. You
already described how texts can engender these kind of experiences.
Yeah.
And just so we're clear here, when you say there's hope for a muggle like me,
and me,
you're saying by reading, let's say, Nietzsche, are you saying, here's the weaker form of that argument, by reading Nietzsche, that can catalyze my own experience of Calcutta that you had, or something like that? The stronger version is the mere fact of reading Nietzsche is a kind of mystical praxis.
I'm saying more the former.
You're saying the former, okay. You're not saying that the act of reading.
I mean, because the truth is that reading Nietzsche, or reading anyone, it doesn't have to be Nietzsche, is often banal and ineffective. But for some reason, some readers pick up things, and there is this transmission, and there is this catalytic kind of altered state that happens.
Right.
And so I don't understand. I don't think we understand why some people read a philosopher like a cereal box, and other people are completely changed by reading Plato or reading Freud or something. I mean, why? We don't really know why.
Interesting. Obviously, you're like Nietzsche. You're making fun of the British analytical tradition when you say the cereal box.
I am
right?
Definitely making fun.
A1, A2, A3.
I think the analytic tradition's just silly.
Right. It's interesting. So the analytic tradition looks at the continental tradition and says your literary methods are they are non-rigorous.
It's the first floor talking to the second floor.
Right. Whereas you're saying, no, my literary methods is my way of trying to get something into you or out of you.
And it's the only way you can do it. You cannot put the second floor in rational terms.
Right. I see.
So it's a serious kind of argument about levels of knowledge, and there are forms of knowledge. To speak in terms of neuroscience, the right brain cannot speak to the left brain, except in symbolic or symbolic code or patterns or story. It literally can't use language or mathematics.
Right.
And that's more what I'm trying to say, is that there are other forms of knowledge than just rational knowledge or just mathematical knowledge. There are narrative forms, there are literary forms, there are symbolic forms that are speaking of something beyond the filter entirely. Let me back up and explain how I got to that idea.
Please,
because I got to it through different routes. One is just listening to a lot of people's stories, people's paranormal experiences. And I realized at some point that virtually all of those experiences were using language. Mm. They were hearing words, or they were now telling a story, or that the paranormal itself expresses itself through language.
Okay, but how else could it express itself? I mean, it does express itself physically, right? Visually,
things literally, like this mother whose child was in a car accident. It occurs through a story, through a movie going off, but there's literally words attached to that car wreck, child. So, I mean, it's literally communicating.
Hold on. So she would hear the word car wreck, or she would see the word car wreck, or yeah.
I can't speak to that particular case, but there's so many cases like channeled literature, mediums, where there's literally language
Right.
that's involved in the paranormal communication. And what I'm trying to say about the mother is there's a story there too. She's telling me a story
Right.
in words, in narrative form, after the event, because that's the form that the experience takes. So what I'm trying to say is that the paranormal itself, let's just call it the paranormal. We can call it the impossible, we can call it whatever we want to call it, but it's communicating to human beings in and through language and narrative. Therefore, language and narrative have the ability to induce paranormal states. That's the argument, that there's this relationship between paranormality and textuality, and therefore you can use one to induce the other.
Right. How are texts different, better, worse conduits than, let's say, meditation of these states? It's just one of many, right? Or do you want to privilege the text?
I'm privileging the text because
You're a scholar.
I'm a writer.
Right.
And we privilege words. But it's not just words. Like, for example, you might see a lot of experiencers, they encode their experiences in words. They write them out, but they also draw them or paint them, or they express them through visual
Which
images.
seems to go against this thesis that it always is. Or maybe you don't want to make the always claim, but
I am understanding textuality very broadly.
I see, as semantic, as meaning, as right,
yes.
right, instead of laws or instead of right. I see.
Yes.
So you say, this is a quote from you: text can transform us because we ourselves are texts. And you say the world is a text. What do you mean by that? And importantly, what are you saying it is not?
So when I think of, first of all, every thought is a sentence in our head.
Right.
We are literally speaking, we're literally writing inside our minds. And I think when people think about themselves, what they're really doing is they're isolating maybe a couple dozen memories out of this huge bank of millions and millions of events. And so I think the self itself is language, is itself a kind of narrative that we tell ourselves, probably because we want to exist. I don't know why we tell ourselves these stories, but we do over and over and over again. We say, oh, that's Jeff, or that's Jonathan, or that's whoever that is. So I think we're texts in the sense that I think we're grammatical sentences in our head, and we're narratives. And so if we can somehow change those, we can change the self or the experience that we have. That's the argument.
Right. So the Stoic view, I'm going to simplify it, is that this is quite different, but they believe that humans are a series of a sense, right? You're assenting to propositions, yes or no. This is pain is good or bad. That's not exactly what you're saying, but that's kind of right. You're saying the human is actually semantic. The human is made of these. This is why psychoanalysis works, right? It's teasing out the hidden things you're assuming to. And by the way, cognitive behavioral therapies comes from the Stoics, or there's a long lineage that can be traced back. That's what you're getting at. What are you saying the human is not? Or like, why is this an interesting statement? What is the contra view that you're trying to juxtapose man as text against?
Maybe this materialist or biological view.
Right, we are atoms flying in and out.
I mean, we're clearly not just that. I'm really interested though. I mean, again, I think this comes from listening to lots of experiences. And it's not just that these experiences are texts or stories, it's that the story or the text is criticizing itself. It's stepping outside of itself and saying, this is a bad story. You probably don't want to keep telling this story.
Right.
And that's, to me, where paranormal experiences are so interesting, because I think that they're thoughts or critical theories that haven't yet happened. There's a kind of comedic or trickster element or reflexive element that's focusing back on the story and saying, don't tell this story anymore. Let's get out of this story. Let's take this story down. Let's tell a different story.
Right. So let me try to summarize. You can tell me if I got it right or wrong about your thesis, which is that reading is a privileged medium for everyone, not just for you, of transmitting these experiences because these experiences themselves are semantic and we are semantic. And so therefore, in order to save my literary career and to try to engender one of these things, I should read the mystical greats while messing up with my radio.
Yeah.
I'm not saying you're telling me to do that. I'm saying if I were, hypothetical imperative, if I were to wants to do that, that's how I would go about it.
I think reading these altered states in the form of text does mess up your radio.
Right, but I can mess it up even more.
Maybe.
I'm serious. I'm drawing out your conclusion, right? I'm taking your conclusion to its natural conclusions.
Yeah. Just so you know, but you can also mess it up in a way that isn't healthy or isn't functional. But again, health. I'm not privileging health here either. It's like.
But that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
But hold on. But there is no way to mess it up that's healthy and functional, right?
No, there isn't.
Right. So let me ask you again, seriously, if such an experience doesn't happen to me, my literary career is over, right? Or rather, the best thing I can be is a British Oxon scholar, a British Hertz scholar, right? That's the best thing. I just go back to analyzing Hegel and reconstructing, Rousseau in an analytical way.
Maybe you're just too happy, Jonathan.
That's what I think I am, honestly. I am like privileged beyond anyone's belief. I had all great upbringings. I just had the best life. I'm living the best life.
I can relate to that.
Yeah, I'm just having so much fun. Yeah.
I don't actually want to be these experiencers or these mystics because they suffer and they have messed up lives. So I'm like, I don't want to do that.
Right, and that is my kind of tension, right? Because I'm seeing all the sacrifices one needs to make to even start getting access to this, and I'm like, does it really make the trade-off? And especially because we talked about Barty in one of our other conversations. Barty just treats it as excessive pleasure, and so that's why if it's just that, if it's hedonism, then I think, well, it's fine if I want to keep my own life here. But if it's soteriology, if it's the salvation of myself, if I need to get that to be reunited with God.
See, this is where non-duality comes in. I don't think you need that. I think salvation is.
Right. Well, I guess for you, when I die, I get to experience it anyway, right? So I can live a good life. I mean, I'm asking as a person here. Like, if you were in my shoes, you wouldn't mess up the radio and like to try to make myself socially estranged.
I wouldn't. No, I think you have a good life. I think you're doing the right. You're flying around the country talking to cool people.
Yeah.
I mean, come on. It's
right.
Like,
so I should keep doing this, and when I die, I'll get to experience it anyway.
Yeah, I really do think that. I think you're going to have that anyway, and you never know. You just never know what's going to happen. You might be talking to someone, or you might have a near-death experience, God forbid, one of the ways I think about this is what would I want my children to do?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Yeah, and the answer is I wouldn't want them to have these experiences. I want to be a good father or a good parent.
So in your decades of research, there hasn't been one happy person, a successful person that you can say they had this.
They're super happy after the event, but during it,
you can't think of one like nice like I had a vision of rainbows and unicorns having having fun and like.
Well, yes, there have been. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so how do I get that? I think I want that. I don't think I want the.
I want that too. It's a real question. I guess another way to say this is I think that the paranormal or the impossible is linked to human suffering. And I also think it's linked to healing, because I think that what a lot of these events are about is trying to heal or put the pieces back together. So this is where I get into things like social justice and medical healing and personal. I mean, it is all related,
Right. Okay. So this is how I harmonize both your claim that you wouldn't want your kids to do this, or me, or even yourself, frankly, and you think it's the telos of life, you harmonize it by the fact that it is the telos because you're going to get to experience it when you die. So you don't have to. Right.
Plus, I really think
Right.
the superhumans are coming.
Right.
I really think there's an evolutionary purpose to our existence. And I think, going back to Nietzsche, I mean, mothers and fathers are really important. Childbearing is really important because that's how you produce the Ubermensch.
Right.
That's how you do it.
Right. Okay. So again, this is going to sound jovialer, but in your opinion, if I don't get these experiences, what should I do with my philosophical career? I'm serious. Like, because this is your claim, right? If I'm competing against Mr. Spoken to by the Muse here, and Mr. The Rock gave me the psychedelic experiences, I got nothing. This is a serious question.
Okay. This takes us back to the ideas or the theories. So the point of these altered states is to speak, is to communicate to lots of people. And I think the idea is that then those people integrate that message in different ways into their lives. And I think you're doing it through this philosophical search. I think that's a way it's integrated into society and into the conversation.
But there was no experience to integrate.
What's that?
But there was no mystical experience I'm not integrating a mystical experience.
You're integrating the altered states of other people, though.
Right.
Into a conversation, a public conversation.
But that's different from having experience oneself.
Yeah, it is different.
Right? If I never had an orgasm before, I can read all about orgasms.
And what I'm trying to say is,
right.
life might very likely produce these states, and you will be ready for them because of these other conversations. You'll have a way of understanding and integrating them that other people won't have.
Okay, so here's my maybe even more serious question, which is suffering is going to come for me. Of course, as it comes for everyone. This is the core Buddhist Stoic insight.
Right.
In a moment of suffering, how can I not let a good crisis go to waste? Like, let's say I get into a car crash or I'm persecuted politically. What are the things that I can do to engender such a healing mystical experience?
Again, I think this conversation is crucial because you can be ready for those experiences by having a social system or a thought system in which to integrate them.
But I'm not asking how better to integrate. I'm asking how best to experience. That's different.
I don't think they're unrelated.
I see.
Let me put it this way. So I have this friend named Peter Shostatt Hughes who works on philosophy and psychedelics. And basically what Peter says is, before you take such a psychoactive substance, you better darn well know about metaphysics.
Because otherwise it's going to lead you astray.
You are not going to have a clue what happened. If you've studied dual aspect monism and dualism and idealism, and all, you're going to know what your experience was like, and you're going to be able to slot these into one of these categories. And it's not necessarily going to solve the world, but it's going to give you a vocabulary to talk about your altered state. That's what I'm saying. Philosophy philosophy really begins, as you know, with this parable of the cave and Plato and the Republic. And the whole idea of it is, you go out of the cave, but you come back into the cave. And education is not just vocational training. It's not just here to make you a better soldier or baker or whatever. It's here to show you the truth of things.
Right.
And if you've had that experience, then you can actually be a better ruler or a better guard or a better baker inside the cave.
This is the non-dual aspect.
Yeah. And I think Plato was right about that, actually. I think people who are highly educated, who understand and who've had some altered state or some experience of the truth, they are way better business people or doctors or lawyers or teachers or whatever they are in society, just because they've had that experience and they can think about it.
Well, let me ask you this. There seems to be a way that many people claim to get access to the experiences without terrible trauma, which is through these psychoactive substances.
Which are also trauma, by the way.
I see. But is that a dependable way for someone to experience something? Or is that a different thing altogether than what you experienced, for example, in Calcutta or Nietzsche's experience at the Rock? Is that...
So those experiences in front of the Rock and in Calcutta, they're not reliable.
But the psychedelic one is more reliable.
Yeah, and this is the attraction. This is the attraction of psychedelics, is that if you give these to individuals, the chances are extremely high, in the 90-some%, that they're going to have such an altered state.
Okay, well, problem solved, right? Like, well, why bother being aesthetic? Why bother unless you think it's a different kind of altered state?
I actually don't. I actually do think it's related to these mystical states. But what is it? I mean, I think it can be. I think that the psychoactive chemical, though, often will produce negative states as well. And if we don't have a way of thinking about them or integrating or talking about them, we're just going to slice that off. And we're going to say, they're going to talk about the positive states, but they're not going to talk about the negative states.
Right.
No, they all happened. It's all part of what's being revealed.
Oh, hold on. Well, maybe that's part of the consciousness evolution, which is these substances. Right?
Maybe.
Because now, first time in human history, well, I guess there was naturally occurring substances as well. We do have reliable, I mean, this whole conversation has been, how do I get access to these states? And, I can't replicate them in a way. I have to wait for the muse to come down to me before I can be a great writer. But now you're telling me there is a way, 90+% chance of getting them.
Well,
that is authentic.
But we do not have the sophistication around the altered states. We're treating these chemicals like pharmaceuticals, or we're treating mental illness or post-traumatic stress disorder. We only use we're treating these as essentially ways to treat problems. We're not using them for metaphysical or soteriological purposes. And I think we should.
Right.
I think we should. But as a culture, we have to actually listen to people like me who know a ton about these soteriological systems. We're like, well, don't do that, don't do this. Yeah, do that, do this. So we actually, and this was Peter's point actually, is that there's a ton of background in the history of philosophy of the very states that people are experiencing.
Right.
So why aren't you listening to us?
Right. Well, now that I say this, this is a very secular Muggle interpretation of the burning bush in the Old Testament. Some say that's a psychoactive kind of that engendered, and so you actually believe there's nothing different in kind necessarily.
Yeah.
Right, because both of it, and sorry, this is traumatic because it messes up your brain structure in the time that you're.
Yeah, it does.
I see. So,
it does. Let me put it this way. So I wrote this history of Esalen. And it's really a history of the counterculture. And one of the very first focal points or initiatives of the Institute, or what became Esalen in 62 is when it started, was actually psychedelics and religion.
Right. And Esalen, for our audience, is
in Big Sur, California. It's an institute, and it's one of the hubs of what became the American counterculture. And
the New Age movement,
Yeah. The New Age movement comes later in the 80s, but certainly in the 60s and 70s, the hippie movement and the whole California thing is Esalen and Big Sur, along with Monterey and Haight-Ashbury and San Francisco, are one of the hubs of it. But anyway, the issue in the early 60s around psychedelics and religion was not criminality. These were not legally prohibited. The issues were around religion. And
it was threatening to religious authorities?
Yes, because it doesn't require work. It doesn't require prayer. It doesn't require the right belief.
Or thousands of years of meditation over multiple lifetimes.
It doesn't.
Right?
There doesn't seem to be a relationship between correct belief and whether you have a positive psychedelic experience or a negative one. It just we don't see it. And so that was the challenge. It was really a theological problem. And so when I come down on the position that there really is no difference between some psychedelic states and some mystical states, I'm taking a particular position that belief is actually irrelevant. It's really irrelevant.
Right. Well, this actually makes sense in another way, because you connect the mystical states with the erotic, and then you connect the mystical state with the psychedelic state.
I do.
And obviously, there's a connection between the erotic and the psychedelic state as well.
Obviously.
Right.
And also, there's a connection with everything, by the way. I mean, what I want to say is we lack sophistication around these states. Early on in the 60s and 70s, when we were just learning about ayahuasca in Latin America, one of these anthropologists went down and he had this incredible experience on ayahuasca, and he met these beings who basically controlled all of space and time, and they were shaped like dragons, and he was impressed. So he comes back, this is a story now, he comes back to his shaman and he says, well, I saw these beings that are shaped like dragons and they control all of space and time, and I think they were red. And the shaman says, yeah, they're always saying that. That's sophistication. In other words, you don't believe literally what you see in a psychedelic state necessarily, but you need the shaman or you need the expert to inject that suspicion in you.
Wait, when he says they're always saying that, he's saying the people who take it always say that, or the dragons are always saying that?
The dragons are always saying that.
Oh,
so he's making fun.
A joke. He's a joke.
He's like, making fun of the state, and that was like this shock or this revelation to this anthropologist. Is like, oh my God, but that's kind of what I'm trying to say is we need sophistication around these states.
Right. In the same way that a Buddhist master, if you want to meditate, you need someone who guides you, right? Like who knows how to deal with certain things that happen during prolonged periods of meditation. Yeah. Let me pull back a bit to the writer-mystic kind of thesis, because I want to point to a kind of tension, which is that the good mystic is an insider. How much more insight can you get? The good writer needs some kind of distance, needs to be an outsider in some sense. The mystics, the holy men I've met at least, they take a radical leap of faith. Reason is kind of suspended. The best scholars are the opposite, right? The best scholars are like you. You don't want to be led by anyone. So there seems to be not just a tension, but an analytical difference that Nietzsche demands. How do you go about reconciling that?
I just think we're in a very different place today. And first of all, I would say a lot of the mystical writers are in tension with their surround. A lot of them were killed or harassed, and the issue of censorship and secrecy is like crucial to this whole literature. So there's a real, and self-censorship. I think we self-censor a lot. So there's a real tension within the mystical writer themselves. But I do think we're in a different place today. I don't think we're like the historical mystics or saints, and we're not like the Tibetan Buddhists. I don't think Tibetan Buddhism is true for everyone for all time. Maybe they do, and I just think we're in a different place. And this gets back to the comparative religion question.
This is the Übermensch.
This is the Übermensch.
It demands a new kind of.
I think there's a new era. There's a future here that is not the past and it's not the present. It's not us. It's not us. And I don't know what it is. People are like, okay, well, what is it, Jeff?
Tell me. Yeah,
I don't know. If I knew, I would tell you. But I don't know. But that's why it's non-human. It's other than human, or more than human, or it's cosmic, or it's something else. So I think that's what a lot of us are working for, is a future that doesn't exist yet, but it will, and then it will suck, and then other people in that future will say, we got to do something else. We need a different story. We'll tell a different story. Then we have another future. We have another species, and it just keeps going like that.
But go back to my question about the how you balance, or how these mystics and scholars balance this insider-outsider tension. And
I don't think they do. I'm not a believer in balance, by the way.
Right.
I think it.
So what do they do? Do they oscillate? Do they choose one? There is a tension between.
They're messed up. They're messed up. That's why they write. That's why they found communities. That's why they do things.
Right. Wow. Writing is a therapy.
Yeah.
In the way
but it's also being messed up. I think I think the true writer doesn't fit in, and writes to fit in, but doesn't really ever do that.
I see. Let me read you a quote from one of your second book, Roads of Excess. I have revealed, you speaking, some of the psychological, sexual, ethical, and political complexities of my own life and work, not to resolve these tensions, much less to deny their presence, but rather to exaggerate, italics, them. And this with the hope, foolish or no, that they might lead me somewhere worth going if I follow them with a critical, self-reflexive honesty. Remaining on the outside of a mystical tradition allows one, italics, precisely by virtue of that same distance, to go deeper inside than even the insider will allow himself to go. But this messiness is productive. Why? This tension. Like, why is the outsider more privileged than the insider?
I don't know if it's more privileged, but it's differently privileged, and it's just honesty.
Right.
I think we are on the outside of a lot of traditions, and of course we're also on the inside of other traditions, but we just know so much.
Right, this is the comparison point. We're forced to compare, right?
Yeah, we just...
Right. Well, it's not the 15th century where we can think, oh, those Orientals, those Western barbarians, and we don't have the luxury anymore, right?
Or, yeah, I don't.
Yeah.
I mean, our ancestors 600 years ago would have been born and died within a 50-mile radius. Well, we have the internet now, and we fly all around the world, and we just... That's not us.
Right.
That's what I mean. We're in a fundamentally different situation today.
Yeah. I want to go back to the theory that kind of grounds all of this, which is the filter thesis, right? This idea that mind is not emergent from the brain, but the brain is actually a receptacle. And I've been quite convinced because it seems compelling because there are certain states of low brain activity, but heightened consciousness, right? My question for you is, what do you think the latest achievements in AI have to offer this kind of debate? I don't think it's supportive of the AI, of the filter conscious view, because it's supportive of the other view, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
Because it shows that cold material silicon can produce language, good language, actually. I mean, not really good, but...
Yeah. So I get asked about AI a lot. And of course, I'm not a computer scientist and don't know the industry, but it's the exact opposite of the filter thesis.
Yeah.
It's the production thesis.
Yeah, exactly.
It's materialism gone wild, is the way I put it. The assumption is that consciousness is produced by little bits of information, and if we can produce enough of those bits of information, then it'll become conscious.
Yeah, right.
Okay, well, I don't think that's true. I don't think consciousness is produced by little bits of information. So, I understand that AI can mimic consciousness. I understand that we can be tricked into thinking that something, but it's not conscious.
Okay, but that's not my challenge. My challenge is that it is able to produce and manipulate text extremely well.
Yeah, okay.
And you said that the human is text. You said that the world is text. And so my question for you is, if the filter thesis is right, why does, what the filter thesis is, right? Think about the radio model. The radio has none of the operations of the signal. It is merely receptacle. If that is the view, why does me creating this other kind of radio here with clearly no signal, you and I both agree it's not conscious, why is that able to produce the similar sounds? Why is it able to produce the similar, right? It's actually quite a big threat, I think, to the filter thesis. How do you resolve that?
I don't feel any threat. And
it's a theoretical threat.
And by the way, AI depends entirely on books, that are scanned, that people write, that are based on altered states. So these ideas themselves, I think, come out of these altered states, not through the AI. But again, I could be proven wrong, Jonathan. Maybe so, but I doubt it. I doubt it very much.
Well, I thought of a way to help you dig you out of your hole. So tell me if this is helping.
I don't feel like I'm in a hole.
In the hole that I imaginatively put you in through my impressive argumentation, imminent critique, which is this: maybe the AI is filtering. Maybe it is receiving the signal as well. Why? Well, because as we know, the current LLMs are built off of very abstractly, similar neurological structures of neurons connected to each other. Again, I'm speaking very high level here. I actually did have a degree in computer science. And maybe that is the structure of the antenna.
Maybe, but I doubt it. I mean, listen, I've heard papers and I've listened a lot to this, and also a lot of paranormal phenomena happen around computers, by the way, and with things that are on screens and things. But there's always a human being connected to the story. There's always an embodied form of consciousness that's somehow interacting with the machine or the technology. And so that's my suspicion, is that what we're really talking about when we talk about AI becoming conscious, first of all, it's not going to happen because it assumes materialism, which I think is false. But that doesn't mean there can't be some kind of mind to matter connection. There certainly can be.
Okay, so if you're right, this is quite an optimistic view for humanity because it means that we have something special that the machine cannot do. How would you describe that? What is that thing?
It's called consciousness or mind,
right.
or awareness. I mean, there's a lot of words for it,
but how does that manifest? Again, let's just take the economic realm. Like, what kind of job is the machine just fundamentally, ontologically incapable of because it does not have that? Or maybe the machine, your position could be the machine doesn't have that, but it could imitate us totally.
Reflexivity. You can't think back. I think the human ability to transcend itself and to think about its thoughts and to have feelings about its feelings, I think is fundamentally human. And I don't think we'd see that in the AI or the computer.
Right. And how? Again,
and it is optimistic. I am an optimist, and I'm a utopianist too, by the way. I think the future is Uber mentioned.
Yeah.
I don't think it's about computers becoming conscious and taking over the world and killing us. That's materialism, by the way.
Yeah.
I think emergence is just a cop-out. It's like, why does it emerge?
Yeah.
Why? Why does life or mind emerge from dead matter? What?
Right.
It's just a refusal to acknowledge that there's something fundamentally unique and special about consciousness or mind.
Right. This is an idea I was toying with while reading your books, because my first foray into philosophy through Columbia philosophers was in recognition theory.
Uh-huh.
Rousseau's animal propre, Hegel, recognitions, the master-slave dialectic, Girard's mimesis. And it's about the simple analogy that I like to use is Hume talks about how humans are violin strings. And if you flick one, a similar vibration goes into the other. So Girard explains how the things I desires are social, or they're socially constructed. And I'm wondering if the filter thesis gives a whole new ontological spin for why recognition is so important, because it's literally connecting to another antenna that's connected deeper to this one. This is really out there, right? I'm just entertaining an idea. Does that ring a bell?
Of course, I don't know. I don't know that literature, but I do know that so much of philosophical thought and so much of modern thought is based on the production model. And once you shift to a filter model, I do think not everything changes, but a lot changes very quickly.
Well, the next topic of our conversation, this is the thing that has changed the most, is the humanities into the superhumanities, right? What in your mind is the superhumanities?
Well, the superhumanities is the humanities, but with foregrounding altered states, and saying that the production of ideas, the source of ideas, really are these altered states. People do not think their way to these thoughts. These thoughts are revealed to them, essentially.
I see. This is a fascinating claim that you made that drew something together in my mind. The decline of the humanities is because of materialism. Why?
Well, it's also because humanists have sided with materialism and made it boring and banal. And by that phrase, I mean, so there's two different issues here. There's a kind of truth issue, what's philosophically true, and there's what we can, I think, call a marketing issue. And I think what humanists have done, first of all, they call themselves humanists, which people think is equivalent to atheists or something, I don't know. So we intentionally use words that nobody wants to hear. Nobody even knows what they mean. Like, what do the humanities mean? What is that? What is the story we're telling about that? Where materialism has a story. Everything can be reduced to smaller parts, and ultimately it's about atoms bouncing around in empty space, and we can kind of build up through that through chemistry and biology, and we eventually get you and me. I mean, there's a story there. And that can be related, and it produces really cool, that assumption produces really cool, or can produce really cool technology and stuff that we use. And so everybody conflates the technology with the interpretation.
Materialism won out because of its effects, not because of its truth.
Yeah. But it is true. It's not that it's false.
Right.
It's that it's inadequate. And I think those are two very different things.
And we can understand that because in your dual aspect monism, it does describe the material aspect of one part of the dual, right? And so, as I understand it, materialism is responsible for the humanities' decline because humanities is, in your own words, the study of consciousness coded in culture.
Right.
So the humanities is what you need to understand a text.
Right.
But suddenly, if all the world is material, you don't need hermeneutics. You need physics. You need math. You need STEM. You need engineering.
Right.
So that's the insight. And the humanities will be rescued when we stop seeing the world as mere matter.
Right. And when we see even STEM, even science, there's always a scientist behind the science. You know, my joke is I've never met a scientist who wasn't a human being. And I haven't. And even the math, which drives all of the science and a lot of the STEM, why do numbers that we just make up in our head, why do they correspond to a material reality? There's some kind of correspondence there that needs to be articulated. I just had this conversation. A colleague of mine asked me what the humanities are. They don't know. Neither do we, by the way. And I said to this colleague, well, one way to think of the difference between the sciences and the humanities is the humanities deals with words, thinks realities is words, and the sciences deal with numbers. They think the world is mathematics. And that's really, that's a simplistic way of thinking of the difference, but that is a difference. But that's the mental and the material. And what dual aspect monism says is they go back to this common source that comes out in these paranormal experiences that we just say don't happen, but of course they do happen, and they don't make any sense unless we posit something like dual aspect monism.
Right. I think this is another way at the cut. Okay, let me read you a quote from yourself. There's a precise logical way to put the difference between the postmodern sign and the symbol. The sign works on the simple principle of what has come down to us as Aristotle's law of excluded middle, whereby a statement cannot be true and false at the same time. Or if you prefer, a thing cannot be two different things at the same time. This gets translated into the postmodern world as the signifier can never be the signified. Not so with the symbolic. This form of knowledge, so apparent in the big dream, the ecstatic vision, and the mystical experience, works through enigma, paradox, and complementarity. The symbolic expression can be true and false at the same time, or it can reference two different things at once. The symbol communes, even if it never quite identifies or fuses the subject and object, the visionary and the vision. The sign is the realm of matter, physics. I'm like, this is murky.
It's the muggle. The sign's the muggle.
The symbol is the side of the wizard. It's the side of the humanities. It's the side of the text. Yeah. Right.
You know, one way to think the mental and the material, the two aspects of reality that people do assume, they basically say the mental isn't really exist. It's a function of the material. And what dual aspect monism says is no, they reach back or they correspond to a deeper reality. And what the superhumanities is it's saying that.
Right. But it's interesting. So the humanities studies the mental, science studies the physical, and the superhumanities studies the one.
Yes. It affirms that, but it doesn't dissuade materialism. It doesn't say there's no material reality. It's not against science. So it's just putting science in a particular place.
Right. So that one, is that textual Or is that laws like science, or it's neither?
It's not.
It's both.
It's not numbers or letters. It's not matter or material. This is the nature of mystical literature. It's a kind of apophatic not knowing. It's nothing with a capital N. It's
right.
But it's great.
It is good. You can affirm
it's not
it.
nihilistic. It's like nothing in the Buddhist sense. It's like the ultimate goal.
Right. Let's move on from the superhumanities to, this is not your word, I'm being playful here, the super science. Because one of the things that is most frustrating about materialism is that it seems to be based on 19th century kind of science, right? It's not even the latest kind of, so tell us about the latest science and the insights, the philosophical conclusions there.
I mean, I'm not, of course, an expert on the latest science, but certainly where I think physics is pushing is to a kind of world where there is no matter. It's mathematics all the way down.
Waves and particles at the same time. It's non-locality, and
there's just thingness is gone. As the quantum physicists say, that the atom is not even a thing. It's a mathematical equation, but math again comes from the mind. It comes from the human mind. And so what is the relationship between mind and physical reality? I think that's kind of the deeper question. There hasn't been matter for 100 years in physics.
Right.
But we keep talking about materialism.
Hold on. So why are you still a dual aspect monist? Like, there is no dual aspect. You're an idealist, no? Like, why aren't you an idealist? If there's no matter, and if it's all math and it math's from the brain, you're an idealist, no? No, because math is over here and the material world, the physics is studying over here, and they do correspond, but they're not the same thing. Hold on, but is there matter or is there no? There's no matter, right?
The math is all in the heads. It's all in the mental realm of the physicists, and the material realm is the physics, the stuff that they're studying. And I do think it all goes back down to a deeper reality. But I don't think we have any way of articulating that deeper realm with science now. Because I think science is set up to study this material realm. Right, but is there matter or is there, science shows us that there's no matter for 100 years. Well, again, there's matter. Clearly there's matter in this mental material world, but I'm saying even in the material world, you're telling me science has shown that this is really an illusion, that this is not what it appears. The particles, yes, it's an illusion. But so is the mind ultimately an illusion. That's what you want to say, right? Because it all collapses into the one. Yeah, because it all goes back down to one. Now, again, I'm struggling here because there is no language here, by the way. There is no math down here that can articulate this zone. I mean, math, let's stick with the dual part of the dual aspect. That's where we're at. That's where we're at, by the way. That's certainly me. That's where I'm at. Certainly me. Where I'm at. But I think that's where all of science is at. I think that's where all of social experience is at. I think that's where it's at. That's the first floor. Right, but not mythical experiences. That for some reason that's the second floor. That's down here. That's the one world. Okay. I want to investigate math because in the first floor, math seems like this weird liminal space, right? Unlike the humanities, it is a sign, it's not symbol. There's one clear answer to each equation. I'm speaking kind of loosely here. But unlike the sciences, it is like a text, right? So tell me about this. I think math is the place you go to talk philosophically about the limitations of science, but also the humanities. I mean, the truth is that mathematics is a symbolic code that human beings made up in their head, and it turned out that it corresponded almost perfectly to the material world. And again, that correspondence has been talked about philosophically for 2,500 years at least, but scientists themselves don't think about that. Right, because they're not philosophers. They're not philosophers, but philosophers think about it endlessly. Yeah. And if you talk, particularly if you talk to mathematicians, a lot of mathematicians will say, well, I think numbers exist, in some other space, and that ultimate reality is numbers. Well, that's a Platonic view.
Right.
They don't know that.
The forms,
generally. Yeah. But so there are a way to talk about some of these issues, and I think science forces our hand to do this.
Tell us about, just briefly, I think the fascinating history of mysticism and math, because a lot of these mathematicians, they were mystics too, right?
Well, this is Pythagoras, this is Plato, where numbers are this liminal space. For Plato, you studied mathematics to get to the good or the beautiful, but mathematics itself was not the good or the beautiful. It was sort of this liminal or inner space. So the origins of mathematics, at least in the Greek world, are very much in that Pythagorean or Platonic system in which you have the human here, and math is this way to truth, as it were, but it's not truth. And I think that's where we get hung up a bit, is we think that math is the truth of things, and we don't get to the good or the beautiful. We just stop there with the math.
Right. But this is also true for modern day mathematicians, right? So there's a story of I can't remember, an Indian math savant.
Yeah. I mean, Srinivasa Ramanujan was his name. I mean, there's some really weird things in the history of math, which you learn about really quickly. Mathematicians just know. They just know these equations are true.
Like Nietzsche, like you, they are given.
They just know, but they can't prove it. They don't.
Right.
They don't have the math to show that it's right, but they know it's right. And
right. But they're only mathematicians by figuring out how to show what they already know.
And Ramanujan is a perfect example, because he was shown hundreds of equations by a Hindu goddess, by the way, who spoke to him in dreams and visions. And
man, I'm really getting.
I know.
There's really no way for me to compete with that.
I know. And this British mathematician named Alistair Hardy, he was completely flummoxed by this as well. And Ramanujan would say to him things like, well, if I tell you actually where I get my equations, you'll think I'm crazy. And of course he would, but he's not.
Right. But what makes him a mathematician is that he didn't just state, he proved or he showed, right? Like
these were later shown by others to be correct. Yeah.
Oh, really? So he was literally just like Oracle of Delphi.
He didn't know. He couldn't prove them. Now, he had a lot of mathematics training. He was a real mathematician, but he didn't prove these equations. They were later proven by others.
I see. Here's something quite interesting in this discussion of humanities and the hard sciences. Christian fundamentalists tend to come from computer science and engineering backgrounds. Yeah. Why?
The reason is, I think, that if you talk to fundamentalists, they're essentially flatlanders. They're literalists. And if you think about computer code or you think about engineering, there's
binary.
There's only one way to build a bridge. Or there might be different ways to build it. But once you build the bridge, if you make a mistake,
right, the thing either works or it doesn't work. It's
very
literal.
It's going to fall. Or the computer code, if you make one mistake in the code, it's not going to work.
Right. One like wrong place semicolon destroys the entire code base from compiling.
Totally.
And so that's why they need to defend the Bible as there's nothing wrong at all with it.
Totally. And what I realized about the study of religion in particular, what we're saying is, well, this text, it actually means 100 things all at once.
It's a symbol. It means many things. They can only work with signs.
This just blew the circuits. Of the engineers and the computer. They're like, no. So there is this kind of literal flatlandish notion that I think is really dominant in particularly computer science and engineering, and is not at all the case in the humanities or history or the study of text. Right. The opposite.
Well, that's why you say the Christian fundamentalists actually hate the humanities, because it is this mushy, one thing can mean two things. What I want to do now is take a brief tour of the Western canon, at least with you, and just to look at how much, in your opinion, we've misread these superhumanists as mere humanists.
Yeah.
Right. Nietzsche was obviously the one we spent the most time with.
Yeah.
Plato, Myth of Ur, Ring of Gyges, Phaedrus, the story of the cherry and the Phaedrus. We were told that these are thought experiments, stories, noble lies, maybe some of them. Do you think that's what they are?
I don't think so. And like the Republic, which I read over the break, it literally ends with
Myth of Ur.
We call it the myth of Ur.
Right.
By the way, that phrase never appears. It's the story of Ur, for sure.
Right.
But we call it a myth because we want to dismiss. But that's actually the climax of this very big book.
Right.
And it's a story about a soldier who has a near-death experience. And it's a story of reincarnation. It's a story of the afterlife and the other world. And it's very clear why the text climaxes or ends with this, but it just gets dismissed. And
That's so funny. You know what I just realized?
What?
When I was taught the Republic, I was taught this was a low point. The ending was a low point. Hey, if you're too stupid, okay, to understand the actual philosophy I've taught you, here's a silly child's tale to kind of get the vibe across. But you're saying that's exactly the opposite.
Yeah, why did they say that? I mean, it doesn't say that. That's like a total interpretation. That's a first floor takedown of the second floor, is what I would say, or the sky.
Right,
you know?
Right. And you know, looking back, Socrates is his daimon, constantly talking to him. Like, what's that about?
The daimon is telling Socrates what not to do constantly. That's his muse. And daimon gets translated into Latin as genius, by the way.
Oh, as a humanist kind of reducing it.
And the humanists reduce it to, oh, this is just intuition, or this is what I'm like, oh, just fuck that. That's silly. It's just.
You know, I actually think one of the greatest revolutions in the 20th century was Strauss, of course, right? Because he had this idea that all writers have to write, very simply, to protect themselves. And so that became a license to reread the entire canon. You're almost engendering a similar, or you want to engender a similar kind of revolution, right?
I don't want to reread the canon. I want us to read it the way I think it was written.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
You want to create the intellectual environment to reread these texts in the mystical way that you think they were intended.
Because and the reason I talk about the superhumanities, I want us to start talking about what we do as cool. This is cool. We are not boring.
Look at this chair, right?
I mean, this is the superhumanities. And I'll tell you what it is. I'll tell you what the superhumanities are. Here's the story. And it involves the Ubermensch, by the way. It involves the superhuman, and they're coming. And this is how we prepare. This is how we engender the coming superhuman. I mean, they'll get that story. That story will be, whoa, that's amazing.
Right. Here's the second set of thinkers here to reread. Gnosticism. Tell us about this tradition, what its core tenets are, and how it got demolished, basically.
Well, first of all, these were Christians who described themselves as Gnostics, and Gnosis was a direct knowledge of divinity and immortality, and we had this spark of Gnosis in us, and so we shared in this divinity, and this just gets crushed. And Jesus was...
At Nicaea or before?
This is like 1st, 2nd century.
Okay, before Nicaea, yeah.
Yeah, and this gets just crushed by Christian orthodoxy because they don't want Christians running around saying they're one with God and you can have a direct experience of divinity.
Yeah. So that's another way, by the way, to interpret the John statements, I and the Father are one. The Gnostics would say, me too, right?
Well,
and that's the threat.
The Gnostic currents run through the Gospel of John like crazy. I mean, that's clearly Gnostic. So that's what I mean by Gnosis. And the way Gnosis gets picked up in the 20th century is it just becomes this anti-body heresy that gets thankfully eliminated by Christian orthodoxy in the 3rd or 4th century.
Okay, but I feel like here's probably the other reason, maybe even the greater reason than the Gnosis as threatening that was eliminated. The snake is the good guy. God is the bad guy.
Right.
Sex is good.
Right.
Eating the tree's fruit is good.
Yeah.
Tell us how the Gnostics got to that reading. Yeah.
First of all, I honestly, I think, like, why are we even talking about these stories anymore? Why do we give so much authority to the Bible? I don't get it. I'm just like, it's just a bunch of stories, a text from the early centuries. Okay, so that's just me complaining. But the Gnostics were not there. They clearly understood these texts in a kind of
revelatory, divine.
Yeah, kind of divine or revelatory way. But the story of that the snake is a devil and that there's a fall and original sin and all this, none of that's in the text. None of it. That's an interpretation that takes over in the 2nd, 3rd century and becomes dominant.
Hold on, but God is good is in the text, right?
Not really.
Okay, hold on.
I mean, not really.
Do the Gnostics have to say the Jews are also evil? Because they follow an evil God in the Gnostic.
No, a lot of the Gnostics are Jews.
But what do you call a people who follow the evil God?
They're dumb. They've
been tricked.
Yeah, they're wrong.
Interesting.
You know, so this Gnostic interpretation of the text is an interpretation of the text, but so is everything else. The text doesn't give you its interpretation.
I mean,
and if you read it, just read it. Read it naively. Read it not as a Christian or a Jew or a Muslim, but just read it. God's not so good in it.
Yeah. By the way, obviously everyone has some kind of assumptions already because of how dominant Christianity is. But I came to it with relatively fresh eyes, and I'm like, why is God seeming to be the envious one here? And like, what's bad with eating the tree of evil? What's bad about eating knowledge and eternal life?
So what the Gnostics did is they had this experience, I think, of divinity and immortality, and they read that text and they're like, well, obviously,
yeah,
God is like jealous here of what's happening.
And that would also explain why.
It explains a lot.
God is kind of mean in the Old Testament.
Yeah. So what the Gnostics...
Kill these people, genocide these people, changes his mind, Abraham, like Job, I'm going to mess with him.
What the Gnostics say, who are both Jews and Christians, by the way, they say that's just a lower demiurge.
Oh, there's Gnostic Jews, too.
Oh, yeah. These are Jews and Christians.
Hold on. These Jews do not believe in Christ. They don't affirm Christ.
Well, Jesus, by the way, was a Jew. Jewish rabbi. So Gnostics is a very broad category. There are lots of different communities here. That's what I was talking about. There are probably dozens, if not hundreds of different.
And I'm asking you, there are strands within Judaism itself that take this Gnostic reading, that, hey, we've been tricked since like the beginning. There's not Christian, not Jewish ethnic people within Christian communities. There are Jewish traditions of this reading.
Yeah, they're Jewish Gnostics. Yeah, I mean, look, this is a position that was definitely in the works, in the air. That the God of these texts is a lower God, a demiurge, to use the Platonic language. And that the higher God, you could access the higher God. We were part of the higher God. You could have direct knowledge of the higher God.
And that's Jesus' God, according to the Gnostics.
That's the God of Jesus. And
right.
Jesus is like he didn't die for your sins here. He's a messenger. He teaches
and he didn't say he died for our sins, even according to the
and the Gnostics
gospel.
are like, no, that's a bad story. That's bad. And but they get eliminated. They get eliminated because they don't believe the things that they lost the culture wars, to use a modern language. I describe myself often as a Gnostic intellectual. By the way.
That's why one of your books is called Serpent's Gifts.
Yeah.
And you say you hiss.
I mean, so one of my position in the Serpent's Gift is that the Gnostics are some of the first real critics, scholars of religion. If you really want to know what criticism looks like, read the Gnostics, because they're severe. You think Nietzsche's severe? You should read some of the Gnostic texts.
Give an example.
Well, the story we just told. This is a lower God who's preventing the gnosis of the young couple. I mean, that's a radical kind of reading.
How did the Gnostics affirm sexuality, and how do they use sexual experience to harmonize the world?
Sometimes they did, and sometimes they didn't. I mean, it's complicated.
Right, but when they did, what was that? Was it like
through something they called the bridal chamber, and they saw sexual intercourse as a sacrament, basically, as a way to access divinity, and so they were sacralizing sexual practice, and sacramentalizing really parenthood as well. But they saw it as a reenactment of divinity. Divinity was both male and female here.
That sounds an awfully like Tantra, right?
It does.
And you make the claim how you interpret Gnosticism as transgression to Orthodox Judeo-Christian tradition in the same way that Tantra is a transgression towards Hinduism.
Yeah, I do.
The obvious difference is that Tantra survives and gets integrated in some way.
That's
even
why.
Though, but how? Why did one survive? Is it because they're monotheists, or
It's why I love India and love Hinduism. Is that it integrated these traditions in a way that the Christian West did not. It crushed them.
So it is that monotheistic kind of impulse you read that I have the truth.
I don't know why. I think there's a lot of complicated social and political and historical reasons why it got crushed. But and Gnosticism survives in the West, but mostly through heresy. There's all these heretical movements that pop up. And it's not that human beings stop being Gnostic. There's always Gnostic individuals, but they tend to be heterodox or heretical.
I see. Let's move on in time a bit. The Renaissance. Tell us how that was engendered by the uncovering of mythical texts.
The Renaissance was, we look back on these centuries, and we call it the Renaissance, the rebirth, and it's a return to Latin and Greek, as you probably know, and a kind of magical model of what the human being is, basically reading Plato, and the human is this transitional species between basically entities like demons and angels and God, and the human can change. So I think the Renaissance is kind of a beginning of this affirmation of the human that then becomes what we call much later the humanities, and it's now debased as the humanities essentially. But it has these magical, mystical origins in the Renaissance for sure.
Interesting. Feuerbach is not conceived of as a mystic by many people. He's most famous, obviously, Marx takes him up. He's most famous for the idea that we have attributed all our good attributes to God and we've alienated them away from ourselves.
Which I think was true.
Yeah, but you take a mystical spin, a reading on him. Tell us about that.
So basically what Feuerbach said is that everything that we think about God is in fact a projection of the human. So it's not that God made man in his own image, it's just that humans made God in their own image, or actually man made God in his own image. Because we imagine God as male. And so it's just this reversal. It's a series of reversals of basic religious or Christian teachings, really, that Feuerbach reverses and returns as projections of the human. And I just think that's correct. I think that humans do project humanity or what they consider to be humanity into divinity. But there's this stream in Feuerbach, and this gets into the superhumanities question. There's this stream where, why do we do that? Why do we experience or believe in a God that looks very human? Well, it's because there's something godlike or divine-like about our humanity.
Right.
So I think there's a very easy way to use a Feuerbachian method that essentially is Gnostic.
Right, but you're saying that is the right reading of Feuerbach, or you're saying that is your development of Feuerbach?
Well, it's certainly my own development or reading of Feuerbach, but I'm not at all convinced that isn't there in Feuerbach.
I see.
I suspect that he had those convictions or those experiences, and that he encodes it in a way that was relevant to his place and time. But I'm not convinced that this method doesn't actually reveal something. William
James, he's just a pragmatist, we're told. What are we missing?
He's not. He's clearly. So when I went to graduate school, it was just a pragmatist kind of line, and it was a Muggle line, and we read the varieties. But what we were never told was that William James spent his whole life really studying psychics and mediums, and by the way, ingesting a lot of psychedelics.
In fact, William James said he could only understand Hegel high,
Uh-huh.
right? Which tells you a lot about both Hegel and James. Yeah,
It makes sense.
yeah.
I mean, I love that story because I think Hegel probably was high when he wrote a lot of that stuff, and that James could only understand Hegel on an altered state actually is the superhumanities method, I think, another code. But my point is that you can't understand William James without thinking about the mystical and spiritualism and psychical research and frankly, what later becomes the New Age. I mean, he's studying all of this in the 19th century, early 20th.
What's even more exciting about James and how much he's been truncated is that his pragmatism is derivative of his mysticism. Is that right?
Yeah.
Like he's just so confused by all these weird ontologies in the way that you and I are. And he's like, all right, let me tread lightly, hence pragmatism, right? Like, or let me be an ontological minimalist or something like that.
I think his pragmatism really was a function of, by pragmatism we mean that truth is really what works.
Yeah.
That there isn't some objective, this is very Nietzschean in some ways. There's not an objective truth to which we're striving. It's not about the good and the beautiful, but it's about what works. And I think James was led to this primarily through studying psychics and mediums and spiritualists, that he realized that they were accessing something, but that there wasn't some objective truth at the end of the tunnel, as it were. That it was really about what works on the ground. So I do think that, and he ends his.
But you disagree with that, right? Because you have your dual aspect monism.
Well, so James ends his life basically on this. Monism is correct, but so is pluralism. It's like a kind of a both and.
But hold on, how is that a pragmatist view? Because
it's not a pragmatist view. I don't think he ends with pragmatism.
I see.
I mean, he writes this book called The Pluralistic Universe, and if you read it, I don't see how you get pragmatism out of it.
Right. So pragmatism was a stepping stone for him.
I think so, and I think it was.
It was his early attempt to deal with the complexity of the religious experiences.
Yeah, and I think that's, again, we misread people because we read a book by them or we read an idea and we think, oh, that's what they thought at the end of it. No, it's not what they thought at the end of their life.
Yeah.
It's not what they thought in their maturity. And if you read A Pluralistic Universe, it's a very non-Aristotelian worldview. It's a very panpsychic worldview.
Let's move on from the canon to something more contemporary. And let's begin with, I think, where a lot of this started, which is mediumship and spiritualism. Tell us about that. Just give a brief history there. What is that movement? How did it start? Yeah.
Well, spiritualism starts really in the late 1840s in the US, and it really peaks in the post-Civil War era, where unfortunately, lots of men died. And spiritualism was about contacting the dead through what they called mediums, mostly women who acted as channels essentially for these spirits.
But this is a historical practice, right? In Leviticus, it bans mediumship. So we know that it's been practiced like.
Leviticus certainly says some really awful things about it, but it's a very human, very ancient practice of contacting the dead. And it's very controversial in the US because a lot of the pastors, by the way, hate it because A, it authorizes women, and B, it's not in the church, it's in the home, and C, it's not biblical. It's not about the Bible at all. It's about contacting the other world. And they had a lot of successes, and there was a lot of fraud as well. I mean, it was all kind of mixed together. And out of this tradition, it hops the ocean and it becomes very prominent in England and Europe. And then it hops the ocean again, it becomes very prominent in Latin America as Spiritism. And then British psychical research develops out of this in the 1870s and 1880s. And it's basically looking at spiritualism and mediums. And then you get parapsychology later in the 1930s and 40s in the US around Duke. And it kind of develops from there. But spiritualism is really kind of the data, as it were.
I see. Jumping forward a bit more, New Age. Tell us about how this began.
So the New Age is a phrase that develops in the 1980s, by the way. It's fairly late. This current has existed in certainly American history for hundreds of years that isn't part of the churches, but sees itself as sort of connecting to the land or connecting outside the religious traditions. Transcendentalism, for example, in the middle of the 19th century is very much about this. New Thought is something that James was involved in, and a lot of Black communities were involved in as well. So there are ways of being spiritual but not religious, way before what we call the New Age. The counterculture develops in the 60s and 70s. It's not really not called the counterculture until the late 60s, by the way. The New Age develops in the 80s. Today, New Age is used as a bad word to make fun of people, basically. But basically, what that movement was about was what we might call a panpsychic worldview, where the human being has access to this larger world where these spirits and entities exist. Psychedelics is very much a part of this. We can talk about psychedelics here.
Timothy Leary and yeah.
Yeah, I think that's one of the reasons that the New Age develops in the 1980s, by the way.
It's chemical.
Is because of psychedelics and because of how many people have had these experiences and how convincing they were.
When I meet someone who I think is an heir of the New Age, the equivalent today, I'm always terribly disappointed. Whereas when I read about those original people who founded them, I'm always somewhat admiring. And is that just me? Because when I meet these people, I'll describe you a stereotype. It's some wealthy white, usually it's a girl, who does yoga and believes, oh, we're all one. She went to Brown, she studied art, she studied art history. She's more bourgeois than she's bohemian. It's become an aesthetic. And I've just been but there's nothing there. There's nothing there. And they don't even take the psychedelics anymore, right?
Well, see, but that's the point. They don't have the altered states, and they didn't.
It's just cool now. It's cool.
It's just cool. It's just
but you agree with my reading.
Yeah, it's just something to market. And I understand. I understand the stereotype, and I understand that personality. But I don't think that's what was happening in the 60s and 70s and 80s. I think people were very genuine about, this was also formed around a rejection of Christianity and Judaism, and an attempt to integrate science, by the way, integrate physics, integrate biology, integrate. They were really looking for a new worldview. That's why they called it the New Age. And it was called the New Age because of this astrological shift from the age of Pisces to the age of Aquarius.
But it failed, or at least it didn't continue.
Did it fail? I don't know. Here's what I really think, and I don't even know why I'm saying this. I think people stopped reading, to be really honest. If you look at the counterculture and the intensity that they were reading a ton.
Right.
And I don't.
There were scholars. There were scholars.
And they were literary figures. There were a lot of literary figures that were involved in there. The Beatniks, for example, they were basically poets and writers. And I think your stereotype of the Brown graduate, they're not reading. They're just wearing yoga pants and going to yoga class.
Right, and getting mocha
They're
coffee.
not reading. Trust me, they are not reading. They're doing this on their phone, So I really, comes back to the paranormal writing us. We're reading.
It has to be a text. It has to be. For it to be deep, it has to be rigorous.
I think so. That sounds nerdy of me, or professorial.
Hey, you're preaching to the choir here, so there's no resistance.
I think it really is about that.
Interesting.
And I'll just say, just to kind of put this out here, the best articulation of the Filter Thesis was Aldous Huxley's, another writer, The Doors of Perception in 1954. And basically, it's a little bitty book. And basically what Huxley does is he takes mescaline outside of LA and he thinks it's going to be his brain on drugs and he's going to see a lot of colors and shapes, and none of that happens. What actually happens is a kind of direct, non-linguistic access to reality. And he makes this argument that actually what mescaline probably does is shut down the brain. And that book then becomes a kind of scriptural text for the counterculture. Everybody reads it.
Yeah. One interesting part about the counterculture, the New Age, that I think is different from a lot of these other mystical movements, Tantra, maybe Gnosticism, you tell me, is that it's quite egalitarian. Whereas these other mythical movements that I'm more familiar with, it's not necessarily a pride or arrogance, but they're like, hey, the people might not be ready for this, right? Like most people might not be ready for this. Do you agree with that distinction? And if so, I'm just thinking out loud here, does it have to do with the chemicals? Because before you need to be a realized master, meditate 1,000 hours, and you can have it. What do you think about that idea?
There's some umph there. I think the two generators of this egalitarianism are, as they said, drugs and rock and roll. I really do believe that. I do think it's about psychedelics and music and how those are accessible, pretty much to everyone. And they have their problematic features, and they destroy lives too. And I don't want to romanticize those social movements, but there's something to that. And remember, the 60s is also the time of the civil rights movement. It's also
there already is progressive
the gay rights movement, the women's movement. Everything is happening. Everything is changing. So there's this profound social development that's going on with the spiritual development. And I think part of your stereotype of the brown yoga pant person, there's no social movement. There's no social transformation.
Yeah, right.
There's also no books, by the way.
Right. Interesting. I want to talk about another kind of New Age, how you described, we're in a new time. And Nietzsche uses this metaphor. We're like
new era.
Sailing, something, leaving ashore. I can't remember the exact quote here. But I think we can answer the religious question better than the great saints and theologians.
Yeah, I do too.
And when I tell my religious friends this, they think I'm crazy.
That's because they believe backwards.
You think you can answer better than Nagarjuna or Al-Ghazali or Augustine? And I said yes.
Yes.
Not because I'm smarter.
Yes.
But we just have much more. We know more. You had a great point in your book. Every single scholar today, every person with an iPhone today has more access to any tradition than the great scholars did. Augustine only read the Timaeus in the Greek. That blows my mind. He's the guy who combined Platonism with Christianity. He's only read, according to many scholars, the Timaeus in the Greek. And not only do we have better access to one tradition, we have so many different traditions. Now we have the latest science. We have a somewhat liberal, in different parts of the world, academic community to address these questions.
I know.
So do you agree? Like we can make
Of course,
better.
I agree.
Yeah.
And we also have things like anthropological genetics and astrophysics. And I mean, we just know stuff that nobody else knew in our past. So why we keep looking to the past for answers is beyond me. I just don't get it. And I think that's what religion is. You're believing backwards. You're affirming someone else's altered state. I'm like, stop it. Just turn around and go to the future now.
How are the ancients more privileged, if at all, compared to us? For example, they're less distracted by stuff.
Yeah, they probably were.
They probably are better meditators because of that, right? So
it's not that we can't learn from our past or from our ancestors. We clearly can. And intelligence existed as far back as we can see. So Nagarjuna knew things maybe that you and I can't know. I don't question that for a second. We should read Nagarjuna, but the truth is,
don't stop at Nagarjuna.
Don't stop with Nagarjuna. And we have lots of people who've translated Nagarjuna now, and we can read in translation. We couldn't do that 100 years ago, by the way.
Right. I do feel like the moment we're in right now is similar to the moment right before Origin of Species came out, where there was so much data. There was data about half man, half ape skulls already, but no one knew how to make sense of it, right? And it took a theory. It took an Origin of Species to.
And the thing to remember is it's still resisted. Origin of Species is still to this day rejected, but for religious reasons.
Right.
And I'm like, why? Why do you do that? It's just...
Yeah. Okay. Your thesis, if I understand it correctly, is that the energy now, in today's day and age, where a lot of this mystical writing is channeled, it's no longer through the New Age stuff, it's no longer through these great books, it's through superheroes, it's through movies. Is your claim that, clearly it's not X-Men are real, but your claim is that the comic book writers are inspired? They have,
Okay.
What's the strongest version of your claim?
So there are multiple arguments there. One is, first of all, entertainment and superhero movies are, I'm very critical of them as well, because I think it's a kind of an arm's length. You can treat these ideas as long as you think it's entertainment.
Right. It's safe as entertainment.
It's safe. And it's not safe. People are telepathic. People do have precognitive experiences. People do have these. And so I wrote this book called Mutants and Mystics, and I showed, I think convincingly, that a lot of the writers and artists who created these characters actually had paranormal experiences, and they wrote about them. And this is why they came up with these stories. That there's a direct relationship between altered states again, or psychical abilities, and these superhero narratives. So I think there is a direct relationship there in terms of creativity. Having said that, I don't think for 2 seconds that the superhero narrative is necessary. I think Nietzsche had all this.
Right.
And more. But people don't read Nietzsche anymore, but they do go to the movies and they watch Marvel film. So it's like, it's kind of where it's meeting people where they're at. It's not, it's a kind of practical or pragmatic solution.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the Planet of the Apes writer was writing a scene about one of the protagonists whose wife gets kidnapped by some evil antagonist, by Brutus. And then after he writes it, his wife gets kidnapped in exactly the same way, right?
Yeah, Doug clearly had a precognitive hit while he's writing this story.
Hold on. You think that was a precognition? I read it as he literally wrote the future.
I know, that's certainly what Doug thinks, but I think he was having a precognitive experience.
Do you think the other thing ever happens, where you write something and that becomes manifested?
I think that's how precognition camouflages itself.
I see.
Yeah,
interesting.
I personally think precognition camouflages itself a lot, as a lot of these experiences. And this, it goes back to a friend and writer, Eric Wargo, who basically thinks the same way. He thinks precognition is essentially the ability that human beings all have, and that a lot of things that we consider psychical or religious or spiritual are actually precognition hiding in different forms.
But why do you prefer that explanation versus?
Because it makes sense to me. It makes a lot of sense take Doug's experience. Doug mentions the writer. I think he's getting a precognitive experience, and he's writing it out as a fantasy of Planet of the Apes.
So he's getting a vision, and he's not pushing it to his unconscious. He's literally getting a vision of his wife getting kidnapped.
No, he's not, actually. He's writing out Brutus holding a gun to this woman's head and engaged in essentially this kidnapping. And then he hears his wife from the kitchen call out to him, and he goes and he sees his wife with a man with a gun to her head. The exact scene.
Okay,
that he had just
so the two interpretations is, one, he manifested that into reality. Two, precognition. In the precognition view, the claim is he didn't have a conscious precognition.
Correct.
Right.
It manifested as what he does. He writes stories.
I see. So precognition doesn't have to be conscious.
No, it seldom is. And you don't even know it's precognition until after it happens. And then you're like, oh shit, I had a precognitive hit. And remember, it's fantasy. So Doug is writing fantasy. He's writing Planet of the Apes, which allows this precognition to come through because it's fantasy. So I think there's this link between fantasy and science fiction and these experiences. That's more than just
See, because it's more right brain, it's less literal, it's less analytical.
and it involves inspiration and it involves writing, and I mean there's a whole slew of things happening here.
Wow. Okay. The superpowers of superheroes are inversely proportional to the sex appeal.
Yep.
Tell us about that.
Well, I mean, Superman is basically infinitely powerful and completely celibate until Lois Lane. I get that. Batman is super sexual. He's literally a playboy.
Right.
He has no superpowers.
Yeah, he's rich.
He's just rich and has really cool gadgets. And he's like really good at the martial arts. But generally, you do get this relationship or this inverse relationship between sexual expression and non-superpowers, which I think is very faithful to religion, by the way.
Okay, so a few ways to read it. One is the hydraulic view, right? Like by not channeling it to sex, they channel it to their powers. One is the compensation view, okay? Like because he's not as sexually attractive, we better make him interesting some way. What's the mechanism you're gesturing at here?
I think it's the hydraulic view. I mean, the hydraulic view, the Freudian view that if you express sexuality in a normal, kind of socially adaptive way, you don't develop superpowers. You don't have these religious experiences. But if you are celibate, this goes back to the same-sex argument. I think this is why one of the reasons same-sex is so powerful is it tends to be repressed in different social situations, and then these energies can manifest in other ways.
Tell us about your story of seeing the X twice, and how you decided to write about a comic book.
I mean, this goes back to the dual aspect monism. I think a lot of times something mental and something material correspond because they go back to some other super source, as it were. I was finishing the Estlin book in about 2006 or 2005 or something. And I found myself becoming obsessed with the X-Men. And I mean obsessed. And which was really odd because the X-Men they were like a B level or C level comic. I mean, when I was a kid, it was the Hulk and Spider-Man and Doctor Strange, and the X-Men were like nothing. They were like completely reinvented in 75, and then they became something, but that was later. And then I realized that the Estlin, the basic idea of the Estlin Institute, the Human Potential Movement, is that there are buds, evolutionary buds that are in every human being, and that these can be accessed and turned into practices, and they result in special abilities or powers. And I was like, that's the X-Men.
Right.
And I realized that the Human Potential, or the Estlin, starts on the West Coast at the exact same time, basically, as the X-Men are invented on the East Coast. Really within a couple months of each other. So there's clearly something's in the air. There's some kind of relationship between what the East Coast is clearly thinking of as a fantasy for adolescents and for young boys, but the West Coast is taking very seriously and is creating a series of movements around. Right. So I'm having these thoughts, and I'm watching this X-Men movie. I'm literally watching an X-Men movie, even in theater, by the way. And I go out into the parking lot. It was our minivan, and right at the minivan, there's a freaking X on the parking lot. And I pick it up, and I'm like, oh, it's an X. And of course, I just watched this X-Men movie. So all of these things were floating or zipping around in my mind, and so I just thought that's fun. That's a fun synchronicity or an element in this story, and I'm just gonna hold on to that. And then this X has kept appearing at very significant moments. And I decided to run with that. I started to run, essentially work with that.
Right.
And so there's this relationship, is what I'm trying to say.
Right. You kept encountering X's right when these critical moments about this idea.
Yeah. And I'm not. It's a playful kind of thing. I'm not.
You're not necessarily saying there's something,
No,
metaphysical
but I'm also
here.
not saying there isn't anything there.
Right.
Because I don't know. I'm not
Right.
trying to be clever.
Right.
Or
You're just telling the story. So your X story actually, in exactly the way you're saying, gave me some confidence to rethink one of the episodes that happened with me. So I'll tell you that story now.
So you're a mutant.
I'll tell you the story and we can decide. I'll tell you all these different stories that I have. The first story related to your ex is I was praying to God. I was struggling with a religious question. I was praying to God in a Latin mass around Easter, on Easter, for God to reveal himself, okay? And like a few days go by or a day goes by, and I was writing intellectual history on the word innovation, okay? And I separated into the classical, the Greek view, and the modern view. And then I'm a huge video game guy, okay? So I love God of War. I don't know if you've heard of it, but it's about son of Zeus basically killing the pantheon, and it's a violent video game that was reimagined, and it became like a fatherly tale. And I was thinking about that, and I accidentally hit my keyboard, and then an omega appears next to the Greek section with a classical view, like right next to the title, the Greek section. And the omega is the symbol of Kratos, the protagonist in the God of War. And if you look at what it takes to hit the keyboard, to type out, I don't know if you accidentally typed out a Greek letter before.
No, I have not. Right? I never have, actually.
Yeah, I haven't either. And I'm like, well, that's odd. It's also really odd, 'cause I asked my Christian friends, I'm like, I just asked God this, why would he show himself in the form of a 21st century video game character? And of course, they gave me a Christian explanation. Well, it's the Alpha and the Omega, and Kratos is become this, he's been Christianized, he was pagan before. But I before reading your books, I was like, this is just a coincidence. Help me unpack that, yeah.
So I think those moments, that generally are called synchronicity, are pretty much omnipresent in human life, and we tend to ignore them because we lack a model to make sense of them. And I think, again, the dual aspect monism, it makes perfect sense within that model. It's like, yeah, these things happen, and they happen, I think, to guide us. I think we're guiding ourselves. I think we're inspiring ourselves. And it's always some material event that corresponds to some mental event, right? I mean, the material event being the omega that appears on your keyboard. You had to...
on the screen after hitting the keyboard.
Yeah. So there's a material event there, but there's also a mental attraction to the video game. And
right. This is why it makes sense. It's me trying to communicate with me, right? It's not the Christian God coming through a video game character.
No, it's you, Jonathan. But it's big you. It's like, wow, that's something.
Right. And so what does that...
What does that mean?
Yeah, what does that mean?
Well, it means that you're bigger than you think you are. And there's more of you than... It means the superhuman. It means you're superhuman. Right. You're not restricted to this social, physical identity.
Right. And it's also weird. Here's some other things that happened ever since reading your books, actually. So maybe it has already, which is weird things just happen. Again, this kind of coincidence and stuff. I'm not a very, I'm gonna use a bad term, superstitious kind of person. But I'm going to Utah right after this. They have Sundance Festival. Right after I searched that up, I read your books. I can't remember what it is, and it literally says Sundance, like some kind of pagan ritual you're talking about. Uh-huh. And I was reading your book on Kali, and then I ran into like this internet thing with Kali, like these weird coincidences. Here's my question, which is, there's an extreme form of this that's become schizophrenia, right?
Yeah.
You're seeing connections where there are none.
Yeah.
How does one decide?
Well, again, I think you're being playful about it.
I see. Not taking it too seriously. Right?
Yeah.
This is your ex thing. This
is my own take on it is, and I use it for inspiration and to guide my writing for sure. But I'm happy to be persuaded not to do that. That's what I mean. I'm not taking it too seriously or literally. Because sometimes these are just coincidences, and there isn't, but sometimes they're not,
Right.
And I think we do have to listen. But what my point is, the point of my books and the point of the Superhumanities is listen.
Yeah.
Just listen. Don't shut yourself off to this. Don't call this
Right.
superstition, or don't do the Christian thing and think it's the omega, all that stuff. Just listen, because you're inspiring yourself and you're talking to yourself. So why won't you listen to yourself?
Right. This is the only traumatic kind of experience really traumatic experience that I've had. Although it doesn't result in any mystical kind of experience. So I'm curious how one can use this. This is as close to being a superhero as I'll ever be. So when I was born, it was a very difficult birth. Traumatic birth. Me and my mother both almost died. I don't remember any of this, of course. Although she might have told me about a near-death experience anyway. And they gave us penicillin. And we found out that we were deadly allergic to penicillin. Okay, so I was in the ICU. I don't remember any of this, right? And they misread my brain scans, and they thought I was going to be clinically retarded. And so they injected me with this mega dose of cerebral lysin, which is this insane brain stimulant.
Wow, they really did a number on it.
Yeah, exactly. So I guess my question is, can I leverage that in any way how can I let a good crisis not go to waste, is what I'm trying to ask, yeah.
I don't know. One of the thoughts I had listening to your story is no wonder you're a seeker. I mean, you came into the world just totally messed up.
But
I mean,
but that didn't carry on. I don't know if, well, maybe I'm compulsive in certain ways, as you can tell, and I'm very different from other people.
There are people who think your birth experience is all defining. I mean, again, I don't know, Jonathan. I study UFOs, as you know, and I had this experience with my mother, and we were watching, of all things, American Idol, and this corny commercial came on, and it had this UFO dangling on a string, and my mom turns to me and she says, "Do you remember the time we saw one of those?" I was like, "No. There's no memory of this." And she told me this wild UFO story of this square object in the sky and how big it was, and they stopped the car and all this stuff. But I was like 5, or something, and so I had no memory of it either. But I can't help thinking that had something to do with my later interest in it. So maybe this is like your
latent kind of.
There's a kind of latency. Yeah, this is where Freud helps me too. I mean, I really do think that there's unconscious dynamics that control a lot of us, a lot of our decisions.
Yeah. This is the final question I'm going to ask for this interview on writing, which is, what is coming next for you? You had this early trajectory of 3 books on the homoerotic and mystical thesis, and then you had Superhumanities, How to Think Impossibly, this whole genre of writing. What is the next part of the oeuvre? Well,
the next part is what I call the super story, and it's this history of the relationship between science, and technology, and the esoteric.
But you covered that already.
No, I didn't. I mean, the first book is called The Physics of Mystics, and it's not out. I'm just finishing it right now. And the second volume is called Biological Gods. It's on evolution and esotericism.
Wow. So in the same way you reread the humanities, now you're going to reread the history of science.
Yeah, that's the idea. And the third volume's on technology, and it's called The Soul as a UFO.
Wow.
Yeah. So, and it's very much, here's the story we're living in now. Here's what it actually is doing. And we actually do know more than our ancestors knew, but here's the story we're telling.
I see. Well, Jeff, thank you so much for the time, and I can't wait to read those future books.
Well, I got to write them first, so I'll have to do
You had the hard work, yeah. Great, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thanks for watching my interview. If you want to go even deeper into these ideas, then please join my email list at jonathanb.com. You'll not only get full-length episodes, but also transcripts, book notes, and invitations to future lectures. Now, if you like this interview, be sure to check out my other ones that I filmed with Jeff Kripal as well. You can find links to those episodes and everything else we discuss in the description and on my website, jonathanb.com. Thank you.